We're going to call this meeting to order. It is 6:03. It is June 23rd, 2020. This is our business meeting. At this time, if you would please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Board members, if you can unmute your mic. Are there any items that board members wish to move from action or from consent to action?
Yes. I don't have it right in front of me because I have to switch screens. The item that we were discussing earlier on finance, I haven't seen the email that we were supposed to get.
Me either, for that matter, if it was sent.
Through the chair, we do have an update on that item, so moving it to action, I believe the actual item is 7A. So moving that to action would allow us that opportunity to have that conversation.
Thank you.
With Mr. Fagan.
Okay,
Did you send the email?
perfect.
Did you send the email? Yes. To the board? Okay, all right.
Okay. So with that, we're going to amend to move action to 7A. And did we want to move the public hearing up before the other item?
Madam Chair, we do have a number of individuals who have requested to speak in regards to item 12C. My recommendation is that we pull that item up so we have the opportunity to address it prior to the public hearing. Or next.
So we're going to move that up. We're going to move that item up, if it's okay with the board members, before the consent item. We'll have that go first, and then after that item, we will go into action, the amended action of 7A from the consent. Is that okay? So we're going to move 12, public or the public hearing up, that information to the first item, and then we're going to go into action with 7A consent, and then we'll follow the rest of our original agenda.
Where are we putting 7A?
Madam Chair?
Where are we putting 7A?
I would do,
After public,
I would do 12C, then follow right back in line with the agenda.
you want to do that?
Yeah.
That way? Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Schiff.
Can you clarify if this is happening before we approve the consent agenda, or if we're approving the consent agenda first and then reorganizing to 12C and then the rest of it?
We're reorganizing. We're beyond consent. We're reorganizing the action agenda. So what Dr. Moore has recommended, and I don't think you heard, he's recommending that we go ahead and take the consent item, take that first, and then we'll go into the other item. I believe that was 12C.
Okay, and I get it that when you're looking at the screen over there, you think you're looking at me.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
But the camera is actually the other way.
Okay.
Thank you.
That was my problem earlier today.
Yes, that's what made me think of it, actually.
Mrs. Ork,
Yes.
you mentioned 12C, but I think the attachment says 12B.
Is it 12?
12B is the terminal policy. 12C is the revision of the code of conduct on the paper that's in front of me.
Okay, but when you open it up, it says 12B under the code of conduct.
Not in what I have. Mine says
Okay.
updated code of conduct is 12C.
I understand that. When you open the actual document, at the top of it, it's worded 12B.
Oh, got it. It says 12B.
Yeah,
Okay, so point of clarification.
Yep.
It's 12.
just when you're referring to those numbers and letters, you
Okay.
might want to just say what it is.
Right.
Thank you.
We'll say code of
12C,
conduct. Right.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I need a approval motion for motion.
So moved.
Motion.
I'll second.
And, okay. Okay, Mrs. Rosario, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, ma'am.
Mrs. Barrenborg?
No, ma'am.
Any other further discussion on this? No? Okay. All right, perfect. So at this time, we are, oh, yes. I'm just trying to get to our citizen input because I know that we have a lot of individuals out in the lobby, but, so at this time, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, 4-0. Now at this time, this is our citizen input portion of the meeting, and I'm just going to read a script that I need to read just so the public understands the process that we're using tonight because of the COVID-19 guidelines we're trying to follow. So I do have this script. The public may offer public comment by appearing in person. Such person will be placed in an area outside the meeting room and invited in to the meeting room at the appropriate time while maintaining the CDC guidelines of social distancing, which is currently defined as no more than 10 individuals in a group and maintaining a distance of at least 6 feet between each individual. The public may also offer public comment by emailing comments to the following email address, which was citizeninput June23@indianriverschools.org. All emails must have been submitted by 12 p.m. this afternoon, and all those emails were provided to the board members ahead of time. And these emails will also be put into the minutes. We will be reading these emails shortly after we have our individuals come and speak. The public is advised that these email addresses are solely for that email address was solely for the purpose of public input. These emails will all be read into the record that were sent to us, and the emails read for citizen input are going to be read aloud by staff. And at this time, what I'll do is the first individual that I have is Mr. Parr, and then after Mr. Parr, I have Miss Sneed. How are you? Good, how are you? Thank you for coming. We do have I hope it's not too distracting, we do have our time there so that it helps you pace as you're speaking.
Great. All righty.
Welcome.
Thank you. All righty. Good evening, board members, Dr. Ward, and district staff. My name is Joseph Parr. I live in Vero Beach, and in 2 days I will be graduating from a small private school in Fort Pierce called St. Andrew's Episcopal Academy. Now, you might be wondering why I'm even speaking this evening since I haven't gone to a public school since my kindergarten year at Rosewood. But it's because I want to become a high school math teacher in this school district. And if speaking here tonight helps to ensure a safe learning environment for all of our kids, I have the moral obligation to do so. With that, I want to begin by imploring all of you to vote in favor of amending the Code of Conduct in order to ban symbols of hate, such as the Confederate flag, swastika, and other symbols that promote hate from our schools. I also implore you to include this ban in the future in the district's racial equity policy. Now, the Confederate flag in particular represents a time where our country was almost completely torn apart. It represents the unjust fight to keep human beings in bondage. The heritage of the Confederacy is hate. It is the moment that we must always remember, but never romanticize or celebrate. Whenever I see the Nazi swastika or any symbols of Nazism, the first thought that comes to me is the Holocaust. The people that promote Nazism spit on the graves of the millions of people that were killed by Adolf Hitler and his regime. We cannot afford to repeat this history in any form, even if that form does not result in mass genocide. Banning the swastika and all symbols of hate takes a small step in preventing history from repeating. Now, many critics of banning hate symbols say that if we ban hate symbols, we will be erasing history. Well, the history of the Holocaust was not erased when the statues of Nazi figures were torn down. The history of the atrocities of Joseph Stalin were not erased when Nikita Khrushchev led the process of de-Stalinization. History is erased when we teach it so that the forces of evil are depicted as morally good. History is erased when we don't tell our kids the truth. And I applaud our schools for teaching the truth to our students. Now, banning symbols of hate and intolerance from our schools is a crucial step towards continuing our quest towards a more perfect union. And I want the students that are victims of hate to be free from having to be reminded yet again of the prejudice that is still alive and well in this country. If we truly want a safe learning environment, we must ban all symbols of hate. When my children ask me, "What did you do for racial justice in 2020?" I hope that I can say that I played a small part in creating a safe environment for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And when do you graduate?
2 days.
You said you were going to be a math teacher?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank
Go,
you.
go talk to Mr. Bassett.
Thank you. Okay, we have Mrs. Sneed, and then after Mrs. Sneed, we have Amanda Gomez.
Hello, my name is Jane McNulty Sneed. I have been a parent in the Indian River County School District for 15 years now. I have 3 children who are now happy, productive members of society. As well, I have an 11-year-old daughter named Natalise, who's a student at Gifford Middle School. And as a matter of fact, this room is named after her great uncle. I have been an active member of both the School Advisory Committee and the PTA for many years, and I am deeply invested in the future of this community. I'm writing today to address my concerns over the allowance of the Confederate flag on school property. This is a debate that has been waged in this district several times over the past few years, and I believe it's a long overdue that we have this change. The history of the flag is one of hatred and violence. While many claim that it's a symbol of Southern heritage, a true study of the history of the flag shows that that is simply not true. It is a rallying symbol of opponents to civil rights, including the desegregation of our school system. My children are a beautiful blend of cultures, including African American and Ashkenazi Jew. They are fully aware of the history of both sides of their family and all of the hardships that their ancestors had to endure to give them the life that they enjoy here in Indian River County. To us, the Confederate flag is no different than the swastika. It is a symbol of those who wish to keep us in positions of subservience and pain. Considering the history of Indian River County and the issues with desegregation that haunt us to this day, it is deeply disturbing to me that this even needs to be a debate. Given the current political climate, it's shocking to me that there are still those who oppose this long overdue change. Our school system is a public place meant to be utilized by all. There are already many dress code policies in place that limit personal freedom to benefit the whole. My daughter can't expose her shoulders on a hot day, but the boy sitting in front of her can drape himself in the clothing of a bigot and call it freedom of personal expression. I'm very hopeful that this new administration and school board, including the Equity Committee, will finally be bold and strong enough to take a stand against hatred and division in this county. Myself and my children are depending on it. I would like to add, I'm not asking you to rewrite history. There is no rewriting history. I'm asking you to rewrite the future and be part of the future that is inclusive for all of our students.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. And then after Mrs. Gomez, we have, or Ms. Gomez, we have Ms. Sanders. Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Moore, and district staff. My name is Amanda Gomez. I am born and raised in Vero Beach and attended Indian River County School since kindergarten. I am here to urge all of you to vote in favor of amending the Code of Conduct in order to ban symbols of hate such as, but not limited to, the Confederate flag, swastika, and the blood drop cross of the KKK from our schools, and adding banning hate symbols in the racial equity policy to make it permanent since the Code of Conduct changes every year. In light of everything going on in our nation and the ever-growing Black Lives Matter movement, which I am a big part of, I believe this is a more important time than ever to vote in favor of banning such symbols permanently. As a Vero Beach resident, I have witnessed many accounts of racism in our schools, such as Gifford Middle School and Vero Beach High School. It is a shame that we allow this to continue even today. I am deciding to specifically focus on the banning of the Confederate flag. A quick look into our nation's history will show that the flag many have dubbed as the Confederate flag is not in the history of flags that the Confederacy flew as symbols of their nation. In fact, there were only 3 flags of the Confederacy and none were the flag that you see today. The flag many see is in fact a version of Robert E. Lee's battle flag, which was later adopted as a naval jack. It was rarely used because of its strict niche. It was later used in 1904 by Confederate vets, but became popular after states flew it at their capitals in support of segregation laws. The flag is now flown as a symbol of white supremacy nationwide. Why should students be allowed to bring such a symbol of hate, Black oppression, and racism into our schools? A quick Google search is enough to show that the flag stands on years of Black oppression and segregation. The flag is continuing to cause issues in our school today. A specific incident in 2017 when a student decided to use the flag as an intimidation tactic after they were offended by a Facebook post that was circling around about how the students were allowed to wear the Confederate flag, but girls can't even show their shoulders. It then led traction in a negative way after students were posting about how it was rednecks versus everyone, which they were toting the Confederate flag with the backing that the students will learn today, using the flag as a strict intimidation tactic. Other students were then scared to go to school because of the threatening racism that the kids who were flying the flag were using. It baffles me that no banning of the flag was passed and is still allowed to be worn today in our schools. The flag itself stands on years of racial injustice and slavery. There is no heritage from a 4-year war, need I remind you, that simply justifies students being allowed to tote this symbol. Honoring freedom of speech is important, but even the First Amendment has boundaries. At this point, the flag has essentially become a gang symbol and has no place in our campuses. So please vote in favor of permanently banning the symbols. Students should not feel uncomfortable in their own school because of the sheer lack of prevention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out. Okay. Ms. Sanders, and then after Ms. Sanders, we have Mr. Olson. Hello, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. Good evening. I am one of those who sent one of the emails. So what I'd like to do, go ahead and read that email, and then I'll have something that I'd like to say right after that. And again, thank you so much. I can't see with these glasses on. Thank you so much.
I can't see without them.
For allowing me to be here. It says, dear members, Superintendent and Equity Committee, as a grandparent of 12 African-American school-age kids, I'm writing you to ask you to ban the Confederate flag as well as any other related artifacts in our school district. It has been a very difficult and almost unbearable time as some of us experience and most of us witness the horrific climate of systemic racism that is flaring not only across our nation but our world. It is dreadful, enough being fearful of our Black boys and girls simply being able to live Black without racial tensions exhibited daily in their lives, but for them to have to go to school and be subjected to further dehumanization intensified by the Confederate flag and other offensive artifacts is too extreme. What we sincerely and justly need is an environment conducive to effective learning for all of our students. The Confederate flag represents one of the bloodiest, divisive times in our history. To Black students, it represents a time when their ancestors, whom they identify with, were labeled 3/5 of a person and deemed property. It represents a time when their ancestors were enslaved, lynched, beaten, maimed, and separated from their families, many times never to be reunited again. It is to Black people what the swastika is to the Jewish, a symbol of hate, a symbol of division, a symbol of genocide, a symbol of terror. We understand that this history will be taught in history books, and that's where it should stay, but outside of the history class, the Confederate flag or its artifacts has no place on our campuses, not on belt buckles, not on cars, not on clothing, not draped over students' bodies or visible to all our students as a whole. It especially should not be visible in a district that is currently under a federally mandated desegregation order. If you want to show that you truly care about the Black students entrusted in your care, ban the Confederate flag and other like items. Take this positive step to help unify all our students and our families while restoring faith and humanity. Make our schools a safe environment for all students to strive and excel in. Respectfully. And as we have seen protests against systemic racism and injustice against Blacks across the world, we have seen mostly the young generation taking a firm stance and making a strong statement. Someone asked me, why do I think the younger generation represents the cause so deeply, since racism is basically a learned behavior, and that from home? My response is that the younger generation, which are mostly latchkey kids, so through the cons, even though there are cons of the latchkey kids, which include kids basically raising themselves with less supervision while their parents are working harder and longer hours to either have more or merely to survive. One of the pros is that parents aren't home to teach the ideals of racism, supremacy, and separation. And because of technology, phones, computers, games, internet, the young people have simply bonded based on the similarities instead of
Mrs.
differences.
Sanders,
Yes.
I do not mean to interrupt you.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we're trying to maintain the 3 minutes for each individual, and.
Has it been 3 minutes already?
It has
It was
been.
that weird sound you heard.
Oh,
Obnoxious timer that went off in the middle of
Yes.
the speaking. Yeah,
okay, well,
sorry.
thank you so much. I apologize for going over,
No,
but I want
no,
you to
don't
know that I'm
apologize.
looking to you all to make the best decision for our children. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight.
That's my pleasure.
Okay. So, Mr. Olson, and then we have Mr. Moment.
Good evening, Dr. Moore, school board members. My name is Charles Olson, O-L-S-S-O-N, Vero Beach High School English Language Arts teacher. I'm an English teacher, so I'm going to talk thematically. I'm going to make literary allusions. The theme of my talk tonight is going to be perspective, and the first literary allusion that I'd like to make is that of To Kill a Mockingbird. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch tries to teach his daughter about perspective when he utters the famous line, "You can never really know a person's point of view until you get inside their skin and walk around in it." We can't literally do that, and I've tried to do that throughout my life, thinking about being in the skin of a Black man. Throughout my life, and more importantly, in current events, it's unsettling, it's uncomfortable. And one of the problems we find ourselves today is because too many people don't want to be unsettled and don't want to be uncomfortable, and they don't want to think about what they're going through. Perspective back in the day was when people would wave the Confederate flag around and naively and innocently saying, "This is a part of my heritage. I'm proud to be a Southerner." But what was conveniently forgotten or left out of my history books was the lines of Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederacy, who stated that the white man is superior to the Negro, and the Negro's natural, normal condition was subordinate to the white man. That changes perspective a lot, and when you take those lines and attach it to the Confederate flag, you have hatred, pure and simple. And this kind of hatred is put in the face of our students every day. And yes, this idea has been brought forward to this board more than once, and nothing's been done about it, which brings me to another literary classic, a a speech that I very often refer to as Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, where he says right in the middle of it, now is not the time to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to step out of that dark and desolate valley. This is the time to act, board members, and I urge you and I implore you that this gradual step of changing the code of conduct for a year is just a baby step. Radical change needs to happen now, and I implore you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then after Mr. Moment, I have Miss Moment. Calvin first, or? Hello.
Hello, how you
Thank you for
doing?
being
Mic check.
here.
Thank you for having me. Hey, I didn't write anything down, but I've had 2 children graduate from Vero Beach High School already, and 3 actually, and I have an 11-year-old daughter that will be attending Sebastian Middle School. My name is Calvin Moment, and I think we should all just take a deep breath and ask ourselves, why are we talking about banning the Confederate flag here in 2020 when it should have been done long time ago? That symbol of hate, oppression, blood, rape, all kind of stuff, it's really getting to everybody. And right now, this nation is at an all-time high of being divided. And I've seen it at Vero Beach High School. I've seen it at Sebastian. I've seen kids with big flags draped across themselves, shirts. What's it remind our kids of? We teach our kids about history. And then just to read something like this, you ask yourself, we're here in 2020, and something that represents this. As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race as a national emblem. That's not our national emblem. The Confederate flag, is significant of our higher cause, the cause of a superior race. If it was up to me, I would tell all people, and not just all people of color, because right now there's a black and there's a white movement and Mexican and everything else going on to try to unify America. And that's what we need right now. But in 2020, the fact that we even have to do this and speak and take out valuable time out of our lives to come and talk about the Confederate flag in 2020, to me, is very disrespectful. I hope that we can do the right thing and get rid of this symbol of hate, you know, and I have confidence that it'll get done. And Superintendent, is this Superintendent?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to Indian River County. And I hope that we can get some positive things done, and so we can move forward in peace and just try to do better by unifying everybody, because it has me angry, and it has a lot of us angry, black and white. We're upset, and we're tired of it. It has no place. So we got to do better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Moment. Sorry.
I was going to say, you can have it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, no, you can have it.
It's a nice pen, so thank you. And then after Miss Moment, we have Mr. Hart. Hi, welcome.
Hello. All right, my name is Kayla Moment. I'm currently a sophomore in college, but I'm speaking on behalf of my experience at Vero Beach High School. So attending Vero Beach High School, I've had my fair share, or unfair share rather, in witnessing students drape the Confederate flag across their bodies, their hoodies, shirts, hats, and even sadder to say, I've witnessed them hang them from their vehicles as they fly through the parking lot. You just have the Confederate flags draping in the air. And it's demeaning, and it's really ignorant, the fact that students know the connotation behind the flag. And seeing things like that is really traumatizing, especially as a black student. And just walking into the school, seeing things like that, it ruins your spirit immediately, and it makes you afraid almost to go into a school that allows a distasteful symbol within their system. And within these feelings, I realize that many others have been forced to experience these feelings as well, and no one deserves that. The Confederate flag, I feel, should be banned from being seen in our school district, and there must be consequences for those who violate any established rules regarding this ban. It serves as a rebuttal to the civil rights movement and represents white supremacy. And some may argue that it's associated with Southern pride and Southern heritage and commemoration of the American Civil War, whatever excuse they choose to use. But in reality, we must ask ourselves, what is it that the South took pride in during that time? And that's racism, slavery, segregation, hate, disgust towards Black people, as they fought to keep them as just property, 3/5 of a person. Black people are humans, just like everyone else, and just the idea alone of treating a human life as just property is absolutely sickening and disgusting. Young teenagers shouldn't have to go to school and be a part of an environment that promotes something like that. They shouldn't have to encounter such traumatic experiences. Schools are meant to include all, and allowing the Confederate flag only reveals the divisiveness that resides in individuals' heart. And we can't control how one feels on the inside, but we can establish rules that ensures the comfort and safety of all of our students. At Vero Beach High School, teachers examine their students every morning to ensure they have on a proper attire that meets the standards in the Student Code of Conduct. I have witnessed teachers tell my Black Haitian friends to remove their country's flag from their attire and threaten to send them to the office if they refuse to because it represents gang-related activity. How does a country flag symbolize gang-related activity? Yet students wear Confederate flag sweatshirts and pass the attire check with no questions asked. Why are staff members and administrators afraid to address this topic is what I ask myself all the time. What does this show our Black students with actions like these? That no one cares whenever they see the flag, they're constantly reminded of a time where their ancestors were enslaved, beaten, hung, separated from their families, and sold like property, and slaughtered like animals? It's enough seeing these offensive flags within our neighborhoods and communities, and the last place a student should expect to see the Confederate flag is within the walls of their school, where they go to learn, not be mentally and physically destroyed. As a strong school district, we must include all students of all shapes and sizes, regardless of race, gender, sexuality, and disability, and etc. As a durable school district, we must not shy away from controversial topics, but stand strong and make correct decisions. Let's not take baby steps with clauses and temporary fixes. We need to leap towards change and make permanent changes. We need to make decisions that ensure the well-being of all our students, and in this case, our Black students. It is without a doubt apparent that Black people are repressed, as is in today's society. So as a school district, we need to support our Black students' feelings and do our part in guaranteeing a happy and comfortable learning environment. Let us take this step towards showing our Black students that their lives matter just as much as every other student's life.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hart, and then we have Mr. Freeman after Mr. Hart. Hello, Mr. Hart. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair, Superintendent, and the board. I went by my dad's house before I came here today, Victor Hart Sr. And I told my dad, I said, Daddy, things you fought for 40, 50 years ago when you went before the board over at the other building over there, we're still fighting for it. He said, son, what are you talking about? I say, Daddy, they still have this no policy on this code of conduct, this dress code thing. He said, son, I thought they've gotten, no, sir, they haven't gotten nothing done. And some of y'all was on this board. In 2016, June 2016, it was on Channel 25, where there was a major incident where somebody took a flag off the back of a truck at Vero Beach High School. Some of y'all remember that incident. 2017, the NAACP, under the leadership of Tony Brown, came before y'all and told y'all need to change the policy of that, and it didn't happen. Why? The question today is, Superintendent Moore, is why? You weren't here. Some were. We have an obligation to do the right thing. Back in 1987, the president, Ronald Reagan, he was over there in East Berlin. And do y'all remember that conversation he had with President Gorbachev? What did he tell him? Mr. Gorbachev, what? Tear that wall down. It's time to tear the wall down. It's time to unite us as one. For 5 years, see, I almost said for 5 cotton-picking years, and then I was going backwards. For 5 years, from 1860 to 1865, that flag had a little bit of significance. But I told someone today I'm going to put on my Facebook page a Confederate flag and the American flag, and you choose this day. Because the word in the Bible says, God said, you choose this day who you going to serve. You going to serve the Confederate flag, you serve him. You going to serve God, or you going to serve the American flag, the flags that were supposed to be united as one. That's what we ought to be doing. And I looked up the definition of policy. We need a policy. Miss Tiffany, we need a policy. That's my friend, so I can call her out.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we need
We talk on the phone all the time.
That's right.
I know.
We need a policy, and we need it soon as possible. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
After Mr. Freeman, we have Mr. Stewart. Hello, welcome.
How you doing?
Thank you for being here.
Good. My name is Ronald Freeman, a proud staff member at Sebastian River High School. I'm not here to speak on the code of conduct. I'm here to speak on the movement of one of our great APs, Ms. Kelly Ward. She is a great leader, a positive leader. At Sebastian River High School in the last couple of years, we don't have experienced a lot of great losses, not just of students, but also our B principal and Mr. Todd Racine. We also experienced a big loss this year with Mr. Billy Wilson, the heart of Sebastian River High School. I think the move of Kelly Ward will be taking the pulse out of Sebastian River High School. Her leadership, her devotion, her commitment to just not only the students, the staff. The staff needs people that they can go to and count on. Her door is always open for strong opinions and great advice. I think that we have to keep her around, being that we're having a new staff, complete new staff. Her experience and her comfort to the staff there is well needed and well deserved, being that we lost a great man like Mr. Billy Wilson. And I think that if there's anything that we can do to keep her aboard, I think we have to do that. I'm not saying that every change that we made was bad. We made some great changes this year at Sebastian River High School, starting with the head. But I think we need to keep her as put for us to have that stability that we all look forward to every day. She's a great leader, a great person to be around. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you.
Hello, welcome.
Hello. Good evening to the board, Dr. Moore. As I was listening to the other speakers, I couldn't help but think of a song that was very popular a few years ago. And this song say, "How did we get here?" Nobody supposed to be here. Nobody should be here. On April 9th, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his Confederate troops, 60,000 of them, to the Union Ulysses S. Grant, General, at approximate courthouse in Virginia. making the beginning of the end of the grinding 4-year-long American Civil War. In Vietnam, I was taught that when we hear a Vietnamese army, Viet Cong, say "Chu Hoi," it is interpreted in English as "I surrender." And when he surrendered, we can't do anything with him except put him in prison. This war should have been over. But here we are in 2020 still fighting this Vietnam War. I mean, this federal Civil War. Now, the law does mandate that teaching African American and American history on May 1994 and 2002, Florida legislature passed a law that the history of African American, including the history of African American people before the political conflicts that led to the development of slavery and the passage of America and the contribution of African American society. This is law. Why aren't we debating on trying to resolve some of these things by incorporating Black history into our curricula? In that way, our children won't be embedded and groomed to hate one another. But instead, here we are in 2020, still litigating over a war that was supposed to have been over in 1865. And we're dealing with symbols that actually, first of all, let us get something straight. That this war, the Civil War that was being fought, was not being fought because it was an end to slavery. It was being fought because it was to defend slavery. I find that offensive. We have a board who have not yet gotten from under a desegregation order. And here we are talking about a Confederate flag, when there are more things we need to be dealing with. Dr. Moore, I hope that you don't ever need my service, because I'm going to be behind you with this.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Stewart, I have you signed up for the other portion. You still want to speak at that?
It depends on what that's going to be about, the board that action sheet.
Over the public hearing?
I have this, it says banning of the Confederate flag is the action item that you're signed up. Did you want to speak to that?
I didn't know whether you was going to bring that one too. No.
Well, we need to share it, but yes, maybe tomorrow would be the perfect time to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I won't need to then.
Okay, thank you for your service to our country. That is all I have for citizen input. Now we have, how many items for 38? Okay. So the procedure is, are you going to take turns? Yes. Okay, perfect. Oh,
Mrs. Peterson is reading for
okay. Do we have that input form?
Yeah, she's
Okay. Perfect. Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Hello.
Hello, I'm Connie Peterson. This is my son, Christopher Peterson, and we're here to read a statement on behalf of Mashawn Green, Pioneer Change, Inc., founder. I could not stand before you physically tonight, but I refuse to miss this moment. It is with sadness that I have to write to you again today in reference to the Confederate flag on behalf of Black students. I stood before you in 2017 with a group of citizens doing a sit-in against racial discrimination and equality in our schools. Despite having more than 60 citizens show up and 25 speak to issues of discrimination and intimidation by allowing the Confederate flag in our schools, 2 of you on this board turned a deaf ear to our pleas. Given the current climate of America with racial tensions and usage of the Confederate flag as a hate symbol, one would think that the board and the district would already have policies prohibiting the usage of the Confederate flag outside of history class. Instead, there has been a blatant disregard for the safety and education of Black students. As a Black woman, the Confederate flag represents a time when Americans elected to kill each other because they wanted to keep my ancestors bound in slavery and considered property, 3/5 a person to be exact. This flag, drenched in our Black ancestors' blood. This flag, embraced and branded by the KKK and profoundly flaunted by white supremacists around the world. This flag that Dylann Roof embraced and murdered 9 Black churchgoers in Charleston, stating he upheld its values and celebrates Southern pride. This is the flag many in our district and on our board have defended, claiming the First Amendment and allowed in our schools every day to remind Black children of when their ancestors were beaten, maimed, hung, dismembered, sold, tortured, raped, humiliated, and owned by white people. Well, what about Black students' 14th Amendment right of equal protection? Speech does not trump safety and an environment conducive to learning for all students. Black parents have entrusted you with their children, and if you cannot protect them and ensure they will be safe in a safe space, both mentally and physically, when entering and leaving our schools, close your doors. Currently, only 35% of Black students in this district are reading on grade level. That means that 65% of Black students are reading below grade level. With those numbers, our students can't afford to have any distractions in their learning environment. They can't afford to be led to believe that they're less than, then have the board and district allow them to be treated as such. Not only should there be a code of conduct policy prohibiting the branding of the Confederate flag, there should be clear punishment if violation occurs and a board policy prohibiting as well. Realistically, policies won't change the discriminatory climate of our district. Leadership must do that through accountability, consequences, and training. Board, if you do nothing else in your tenure, boldly declare today that you will not turn a blind eye to the inequality and discrimination in our district. Politics aside, take a stand on the side of what's best by all students. You ran on that premise. Now is your time to live up to it. Thank you. Marshawn Green.
Thank you.
Nicely read.
Good write-up.
Madam Chair. Yes.
Clarification. Are those emails, were those submitted as citizen input, or were those just the emails that were sent to us?
The emails that we have that are going to be read were actually sent through our citizen input process,
Not
yes.
just regular emails?
No, those, no. Some sent it this way and also sent them to us, but
But we're only reading the ones that were sent through the
yes,
process?
yes.
Okay. This letter is from David Denon. To the members of the board, I am writing you as both a concerned citizen here in Indian River County, as well as the father of 2 children who are currently students in the school district of Indian River County. I understand that there is pending discussion regarding the Confederate flag on school property, with the possibility of banning it from school events and school property. I am writing to voice my support for the banning of the Confederate flag from our school events and properties. The Confederate flag is obviously a part of our country's history and must not be forgotten, but it must be remembered in its appropriate context. This flag must not be erased from our memories, but it should only live on in the context of museums and history lessons, where we can continue to take lessons from its dangerous history, one which tore at the very fabric of our nation. I cannot agree with those that see it as a symbol of states' rights and fighting against an overbearing government. It most certainly represented things much more sinister. My family and I see the Confederate flag as something far different. It was a rebel flag for those that nearly tore our country apart through civil war, a symbol of rebellion and treason. That has not changed. It still represents rebellion, glorifying a horrific civil war. Our country has only one flag now, the American flag. That is the only flag under which we are united. The Confederate flag does not represent our country and never has. It represents division. It was also a banner for those seeking to keep people enslaved and deny their most basic of human rights. Nearly 160 years ago, slavery ended with the end of the Civil War. Although it took years for the news of the Emancipation Proclamation to reach all, as we know from Juneteenth. And as a nation, we still struggle with racism and inequality. It is not appropriate to allow such a symbol of division, rebellion, oppression, and racism on or in our schools or at school events, other than in the context of history or teaching. Our county and school district, as well as the rest of our country, will be facing up to racism in so many facets of our lives. And the school district of Indian River County can be a positive force in that reckoning, leading where it has previously failed, such as the never-ending federal desegregation order we cannot seem to get out from under. I do not see banning the Confederate flag as trampling on freedom of expression or First Amendment rights. I see it as an affirmation of promoting equality, equity, respect, and other positive elements that should be part of our district's mission, while curbing intimidation and racism. The Confederate flag is certainly emotional and intimidating to a large segment of our population. As part of a multiracial family, here I look at my two sons, one black and one white.
Thank you. This email was received by Adriana Decanter. Dear Indian River County Public School District School Board, Indian River County has suffered mightily for over 50 years with resistance to settling a federal desegregation order. Having worked for the federal U.S. Department of Education for 36 years, it was a difficult anachronism to wrap my mind around when I moved here. This lack of respect for our African American community is a power play of deliberate oppression. Black students still feel Black students still feel the Civil War is fought over and over again each year between September and May, as white students are allowed to don clothing with racist images on them, like the Confederate flag, have flags or stickers on their cars, or even drape themselves in it. There is only one reason they are doing this: to frighten or intimidate their fellow classmates. Schools are places of learning. Public schools have always been the cornerstone of our democracy, where we feel our oneness as American citizens. School culture is everything to ensuring learning can take place. Therefore, safeguards must be in place to ensure one group of students cannot dominate or intimidate another. It is up to the superintendent and the school board to set the leadership that says, this will not stand in our schools, in our community, not in Indian River County. These last few weeks, our country has watched as community after community has banded together and marched in unity for justice and to resoundingly proclaim Black Lives Matter. We marched here in our community as well. Please have the courage to act on behalf of our community's convictions and set a policy that will allow every student to be comfortable in their schools and learn. Please ban the Confederate flag. However, it is not enough to just say, ban the Confederate flag in policy documents, like a code of conduct. There also must be clearly articulated consequences for those individuals who might violate the ban. These consequences should be specific to the infringement and consistently enforced across all violators. Because of this, administrative and instructional personnel will need to be trained on what it looks like. Thank you for having the courage of your convictions to make real social change in our schools. A school's culture should be a welcoming and safe place for our students. All best regards. Thank you.
This email is from Kathy Stinson. Dr. Moore and School Board, I have been encouraged by the reports of the progress you and the school board are making to significantly further the movement towards meeting the desegregation order, rather than wasting our money fighting something that is so clearly warranted. Frankly, I was appalled to learn about this when we moved to Vero Beach 5.5 years ago. It is a stain on our country that our schools are so woefully out of step that this order hasn't been met in over 50 years. It is also extremely disturbing to know that in a time when Confederate statues and monuments are being taken down all over this country, that the Confederate flag is not banned on our campuses. It is not heritage. it is hate. And allowing students to wear the symbol of hate and oppression sends a clear message to Black and brown students that racism is tolerated in our schools. Many of our Black and brown students face enough issues at school without the added stress of seeing the symbol of hatred and oppression on their fellow students. Our failure to ban it decades ago is an embarrassment to our community and to our students. My understanding is that there was a decision to stop allowing this a couple of years ago, and the decision was overturned over the summer due to the complaints of some parents. I hope with the new superintendent in place and with new school board members who are more responsive to our entire community, that IRC schools will stand up to racism and racist parents and do what is right for our students so that they feel safer in our schools.
This email was received from Camilo Oleo Pinata. To the members of the school board, I am writing to you as a former student of the Indian River County Public School System. I am a graduate of Vero Beach High School, Storm Grove Middle, and Rosewood Magnet. I say this because I have spent my whole life in this town being shaped by many amazing and kind teachers that have left an indelible mark on me and my childhood. The love and caring that surrounds our teachers and our schools should not be tainted by the stains of the darkest parts of American history. The Confederacy stood against the liberation of slaves across the South. It chose economics over people, slavery over freedom, and hatred over understanding. While it remains part of our history, it should not be enshrined or given credence by its symbol in our school system. There are those who seek to cling onto the symbols and messagery of the Confederacy, claiming it is a symbol of Southern heritage or pride. There are much greater things in our past to celebrate, such as how the city of Fellsmere was one of the first incorporated areas south of the Mason-Dixon to give women the right to vote, or the great Floridian inventor John Gorey, who pioneered the field of artificial cooling, paving the way for air conditioning. There are many people, events, and stories about our past that we can cherish that do not involve the enslavement of others for material gain. The imagery of the Confederacy, and especially their flag, can make students of color feel unsafe in their own school, where they are supposed to be learning. You cannot learn when you are scared. The motto of the school district is serving all students with excellence, but the school board will have fundamentally failed Black and other students of color if they do not ban imagery that seeks to dehumanize them as people. I urge the school board to vote to ban the Confederate imagery in our schools and to protect students of color in our public school system.
This email is from Chet Donnelly. I am baffled as to why there should be a meeting and a vote pertaining to this issue. The Confederate flag is a stain on this country's history. It is the flag of the Ku Klux Klan. It is a symbol of white supremacy. It is the symbol of a domestic enemy and that this country went to war against, and serves as a painful reminder to African Americans. To quote William T. Thompson, the flag's creator, "As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. If you allow students to keep walking around with this image on their clothing, accessories, flags hanging off the back of students' vehicles, then you are complicit in maintaining this narrative. Be on the right side of this fight and ban the Confederate flag."
This email is from Shelley Adele. Dear School Board, I am in firm opposition of the Confederate flag being present on any Indian River County school campuses. Not only should we prohibit the display of the Confederate flag, clothing, stickers, emblems, stickers on lockers on vehicles. This should be listed in the Code of Conduct as an offensive violation, and there should be clear consequences for said violation. I would like to see the institution of a permanent board policy that prohibits brandishing the Confederate flag in all forms, as it represents oppression, racism, and the most divisive and bloodiest time of our history. Feel free to make my opinion public.
This email is from Marla Blake. In the wake of recent events, I feel it is important to reach out to my community leaders in order to begin a dialogue in regards to current policies and standards. As I understand, it is permissible for students to prominently and proudly display the Confederate battle flag, which is a symbol of white supremacy per the flag's creator, William Tappan Thompson, who said this: "Such a flag would be a suitable emblem of our young Confederacy, and sustained by the brave hearts and strong arms of the South, it would soon take rank among the proudest and signs of the nations, and be hailed by the civilized world as the white man's flag. We do not allow gang colors or flags in our schools, and rightly so. But I must know how this school district can defend the display of this flag. The Confederacy lasted 5 years, but the effects of racism live on through the acceptance of not only racist thinking, but racist symbols, and it must stop with our children. Can you imagine what it must feel like to be in the shoes of a black child who sees the symbol in a place they must go every day? I don't want any child to ever feel like they don't belong because they see our school's administrators defending a flag that's purpose was to show the world that they believed so passionately that the people of color were put on the earth to be their servants. Please consider banning this flag in Indian River County schools. It should only be shown for the sole purpose to teach children its true meaning."
This email was received by Anna Bernholtz. Dear School District of Indian River County, my name is Anna Bernholtz, and I was a student at SDIRC Public Schools from 2006 to 2019, recently graduating 9th in my class from Vero Beach High School last spring. Today I am writing you to demand Confederate flags be banned from all SDIRC buildings and campuses. In September of junior year of high school, 2017, about 20 of my fellow students showed up to VBHS wearing Confederate flag t-shirts, and a few others had additional Confederate flags tied to their backpacks. Before that day, I had always noticed the Confederate flags hanging off the backs of cars and trucks in the student parking or on backpacks or belt buckles, but I had never seen so many at one time. The students were trying to make a statement. However, that statement was hateful or at the very least ignorant. In the weeks that followed, zero visible action was taken by the school district. At first, a noticeable group of students continued wearing the shirts each day. Over time, the momentum died down, but by no means did the Confederate flags go away. For the remainder of my education in SDIRC, I never went a week without seeing a fellow student sporting a Confederate flag. Even a teacher had a historic version of a Confederate flag on their wall. As a white student, I was uncomfortable, but I can only imagine the uncomfort of my black peers felt as the school district announced that they would take no actions because sporting hate symbols is protected by freedom of speech. Hate speech is not, as a white student, I was uncomfortable, but I can only imagine the uncomfort my black peers felt as the school district announced they would take no actions. Hate speech is not protected by the First Amendment. The claims of the Confederate flag being a representative of Southern pride failed to understand what the South actually stood for. During the Civil War, the South stood for slavery. It stood for oppression and abuse of black people. The Confederacy only lasted 5 years. This flag represents a group of states that attempted to disband the United States of America on the basis of wanting to keep their slaves imprisoned. As a Jew, I have been raised learning about the atrocities of the Holocaust. Slavery in the U.S. and the Holocaust are not the same thing, but both the Nazis and the Confederacy stood for the abuse of human lives. In Germany, it is illegal to have a Nazi flag. The tagline on SDIRC's website is "Serving all students with excellence." If students feel threatened by the apparel of other students on campus, how can the school district possibly be serving the students with excellence? Every student must feel safe and included in school to be able to learn and grow. Thank you for your time.
This email is from Grace Olson. To whom it may concern, as a former student of the school district of Indian River County, a sister to a student still part of the system, and a daughter of 2 teachers in the system, I ask that you ban Confederate flags in all forms from the school system. I was a junior in high school when Vero Beach High School made the news because there were many students carrying around Confederate flags and wearing Confederate flags on their shirts and were not penalized for it. It was disgusting and humiliating to know that my black peers felt threatened in the place they attend every day to learn. While I understand that the Confederate flag is a symbol of history, I wonder why students read from textbooks that don't give the true history of black people and their contributions and hardships. I have learned more about true Black history in the recent weeks than I did throughout my time in the school district of Indian River County. The Confederate flag may be historically important, but with negative connotation. It is a symbol of hate in the same way that a Nazi flag is used as a symbol of hate. But we can look to Germany as an example, as they do not allow Nazi flags in public places. In the same way, Satan plays a large role in Christian learning and history. Statues of this figure are not placed in churches because Satan is a symbol of hate. The school district of Indian River County should not only think about the small percentage of students who think this flag is important to history, but think about the near 20% of students in the school system that have ancestors that lived that history. It is hateful and makes many students feel unwanted and/or threatened, and I urge the school district to ban the presence of this hateful symbol immediately.
This email was received by Emily Nito. Dear School Board, I am in firm opposition of the Confederate flag being present on any Indian River County school campuses. Not only should we prohibit the display of the Confederate flag, clothing, stickers, emblems, stickers on lockers, on vehicles. This should be listed in the Code of Conduct as an offensive violation, and there should be clear consequences for said violation. I would like to see the institution of a permanent board policy that prohibits brandishing the Confederate flag in all forms, as it represents oppression, racism, and the most divisive and bloodiest time of our history. Feel free to make my opinion public.
This email is from Ryan Dillahay, to whom it may concern. I'm writing to express my opinion as both a citizen of Indian River County and a former student in the Indian River School District. The Confederate flag serves as a seemingly ever-present reminder of the hatred and injustice that marks the past of Florida and the southern United States as a whole. To continue to allow this flag to be paraded about in our schools sends a message of negligence at best and support at worst. It is a disgrace that a symbol of hate and violence can be displayed without consequence in our schools. We must, as a community, work to create spaces that are inclusive and inviting to all students. Banning the display of hateful symbols, such as the Confederate flag, is an important step. Lastly, consider that the Confederacy was unambiguously an enemy of the United States. Should we allow our students to glorify an enemy of the United States as it stands today?
I have two citizen inputs that are together. The first one says, my name is Alan Seidels, and I defer my 3 minutes of citizen input to Vicky Seidels. My name is Vicky Seidels. I am speaking to the board tonight regarding the events of the past 2 weeks and false statements and misrepresentations made by Tiffany Justice on Rhett Palmer's radio show, Lemon Lines, Bob Seuss Radio, and her
Point
false...
of order, Mrs. Zork, excuse me for a moment. While I recognize this is citizen input, this is specific to an issue that was regarding Ms. Seidel's First Amendment rights to cyber harass and bully me online for the better part of a year and a half. I'm going to excuse myself for this portion of citizen input because I feel that I have undergone enough. I feel like that's fair. Dr. Moore, would you be okay with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Do you want to
Bob-
start over?
Okay.
Why don't you start over? Hold on 1 second.
Just a point of clarity, can we yield 3 minutes? I know I'm...
The way that it was written
Okay, no, I'm just making sure.
and submitted.
My name is Vicky Seidels. I am speaking to the board tonight regarding the events of the past 2 weeks and false statements and misrepresentations made by Tiffany Justice on Rhett Palmer's radio show, Lemon Lines, Bob Seuss Radio, and her false statements made in public during the board meeting of June 9, 2020. She made all these statements not as a private citizen, but as a school board member. Board members must start holding her accountable for her actions. In all these interviews, Justice claims complete ignorance of any complete innocence of any wrongdoings, and it was either the Twitter account of 6 months, ex-school employment, or board members or ex-board members that caused her all these problems. Justice also claimed that she never accused board members of taking bribes during a board meeting, and she claimed that she had nothing whatsoever to do with the investigation that took place on the ex-employee who was tweeting. Let's examine these lies. First and foremost, Tiffany Justice was not bullied, cyberstalked, or harassed on Twitter, and this is proven by the letter from State Attorney Steve Wilson. Tiffany Justice either lied to law enforcement Eric Flowers, or Eric Flowers falsified legal documentation in order to obtain a subpoena from new Judge Lynn on January 25, 2019, who is being mentored by Judge Kroom. In order to gag Twitter without any evidence of any wrongdoing whatsoever, Justice never signed any statement, affidavit, according to the public records. She sent him a text. Eric Flowers had a total of 2 tweets mentioning Tiffany Justice at the time he presented any case to Judge Lynn in January 2019. That is not cyberbullying, stalking, or harassment. According to Eric Flowers' sworn statement in public records, she lied to law enforcement, which is a criminal offense. The detective from the Sheriff's Department questioned multiple employees during the course of his investigation, and they told him they all knew of the rumors of Rendell and Justice, according to the warrant, had known about the affair rumor for years. How did a 6-month Twitter account start rumors if all of these employees knew of these rumors for years? It is time for Justice to take responsibility for her own actions. Her repeated phone calls and texts to him, public records, and refusal to use her district-issued cell phone in order to skirt sunshine laws, their out-of-town meetings, public records, her speaking on his behalf to community members, her calling an illegal board meeting in an attempt to obtain over $60,000 in school district funds the day before he announced he has accepted another position, and simply her own actions during the board meetings when another board member questioned Rendell on any agenda item. It has been apparent to those with eyes wide open that the relationship was more than a board member and soup. It makes no difference.
Thank you. Is that, that's 3 minutes?
It makes no difference to most of us who she is with or not with or was with. What does make a difference is the fact that she goes to every media outlet who is willing to listen to her lies and her blaming others for her own failed board seat, and that she goes to any length to make sure her agenda is accomplished. Her agenda, it appears, is taking down any board member that got in her way of saving a dismal soup. Speaking of which, another lie told on the Rhett Palmer show was that Justice stated she had nothing to do with the employee Twitter investigation whatsoever. Tell us then, did Michelle Oak dream up the collusion theory on her own to try and implicate Mrs. Rosario? Half the questions in the interrogation were regarding Mrs. Rosario and had nothing to do with the Twitter account, but Mrs. Rosario had no idea that Michelle Oak in HR was even investigating her. Whose direction was this coming from? Rendell was gone by this time. Justice held Rosario and Zork responsible for his departure. This leads me to my public records request, which is still on a 5-day non-compliance, and Tiffany Justice is already being sued in court for either destruction of school district records or willful disregard of the Freedom of Information Act and the sunshine laws of the state of Florida for non-compliance. Is the HR department going to turn in David Miklas to the bar for not turning over his work product that he has been paid for? Or are we going to obtain the full uncut version of his interrogation dated July 9, 2019? As for Tiffany Justice, please tell us, board members, how much longer do we need to listen to her disregard, disrupt, disrespect the chair and other board members and listen and watch her attempt at controlling these board meetings? She has done nothing but bring shame and drama to the school district. My attempt was to bring Rendell's failure to light. She is the one who inserted herself by involving Eric Flowers in violating my privacy, my 1st, 4th, and 14th, and civil rights. At the time she claimed she was being harassed, I was simply reporting on board meetings and had 40 followers. She then had someone engage with me on Twitter as Bigger Bear 89 by making disparaging remarks about Zork and Rosario so I would post more. They had not had enough engagement by that time, and Kristen Maddox was following the account and needed more. Justice told the detectives she wanted to take this as far as it would go. In addition, in an unprecedented move, she and Rendell had DeAgresta assign Michelle Oak to the task of what was essentially writing a gag letter to the board forbidding them to speak with any employee under investigation. The public records show the emails from Chair Zork asking DeAgresta about me in the email chain and her confirming that I was the person under investigation. Rendell then states he will make all board members aware. The gag order.
Thank you. Thank you. This information is the opinion of the individuals who sent the email and may not represent the opinions of the board members. But at the end, we can speak to any of the citizen input at the end. Go ahead.
This next email is from, I don't want to pronounce this wrong, BEBOKER at AT&T.net. During the discussion on this topic, some will gravitate to the totally discredited lost cause theory of why the South seceded, claiming slavery wasn't the main issue. Please, to put a stake in the heart of this treacherous, ugly lie, have students read the Cornerstone Speech given by Alexander Stephens, the Vice President of the Confederate States of America. The speech gained its name from this part where Stephens explains that the U.S. Constitution was flawed because it said all men were created equal. Our new government is founded on exactly the opposite idea. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests on the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. He goes on to explain that the tortured logic that leads him to believe this, but it's not worthy of note. This speech leaves no doubt of what the Confederacy stood for and what their flag represents. I feel certain that only a tiny minority of those calling this flag part of their heritage are even aware that this speech exists. The daughters of the Confederacy conveniently left any reference to it out of their fanciful, Gone with the Wind version of the Old South. Reading this speech might enlighten them more than anyone else. Here's the link to a great source for this. And they did send in the Cornerstone Speech from teachingamericanhistory.org.
This email was received by April Marshall. Displaying flags of the Confederate States of America in the modern era began as a response to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s and continues to this day in support of white nationalist and white supremacist movements. These facts are a few of the reasons why the Confederate flag should not be allowed in our schools. It reminds us of the hurt and pain that our ancestors had to endure. Schools are meant to teach, socialize, and provide custodial care. But if there is a nasty distraction reminder of the pain, it takes away from what the students are there for. It shouldn't be allowed simply because it doesn't represent anything good.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I ask if we can take a 5-minute break
Right now?
soon?
How many more?
Probably close to 15.
15 more?
Three.
I prefer to push through.
That's fine.
And then
just
we'll-
go to the rest.
Oh. Can you hold off? All right.
Gee.
Okay.
Gee.
We're going to take 5 minutes, and we'll come back at 7:27. This is our business meeting for June 23rd, 2020. We are still in the middle of our citizen input, and we have approximately 15 more.
Approximately.
Okay. Thank you.
This email's from Megan Hoots. To whom it may concern, I am writing in hopes that the Indian River School District will follow the will of our great nation and ban the Confederate flag in our schools. Across the country, symbols of the Confederacy are being removed, and recently NASCAR has banned the Confederate flag. Institutions across America realize this is not heritage. Instead, it is a symbol of intolerance and hate. Now is this time to ban the Confederate flag in our schools.
This email was received by Jasmine Davis. She's class of 2019 graduate and residents of Indian River County. When I was a student at Vero Beach High School, I witnessed students waving a flag that made my stomach turn, a flag that I've always despised and never respected. I watched students plaster the flag on the back of their trucks while laughing and playing music as if they didn't care about anyone else but themselves. They draped themselves with this flag as they walked the hallways as if we did not matter. Oh, but we can rely on the principal and other staff members to stop this, right? No, not at all. The principal even said it was their freedom of speech. When students get out of line, it is your job as authority to get them back in line, to tell them that what they represent is wrong, and educate them properly so that you can ensure the safety and emotions of Black students. When you allow that kind of behavior in our schools, you're responsible for every single fight or argument that occurs because of it. You can denounce fighting and not denounce the Confederate flag. This flag represents nothing but oppression and white supremacy. How am I expected to feel when every time I look at this flag, that I'm 3/5 of a person? The Confederate flag represented the South, and the South promoted slavery. How can I accept that? My ancestors were considered property. They were lynched, beaten, hung from trees, and separated from their families. How are you as a school district of all races that promotes equality supposed to allow this preposterous behavior? A child's focus when attending school should not be on whether or not they belong there, nor they have the feeling of belittlement to others. With all the problems students face today, a racist flag should not be one of them. Parents and students look to authority to handle these situations quickly and effectively, but when that is not done, what do you expect us to do other than fight for change? I leave you with a quote by William T. Thompson, which was one of the designers of the Confederate flag. He states, "As a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. As a national emblem, the Confederate flag, is significant of our higher cause, the cause of a superior race." I hope my input is effective in our goal to banning this flag. Thank you.
This email is from Albie Kirk. Hello. The Confederate flag is purely a symbol of hatred and bigotry that has marred the history of our country. Just as a swastika is inappropriate in school, so too is the Confederate flag. Furthermore, the Confederacy was an enemy of the U.S. Is it truly appropriate to allow people to glorify them? Please ban this hate symbol. Thank you.
This email is from Maria Torres. Dear SDIRC, my name is Maria Torres, a former student of Vero Beach High School. On behalf of the class of 2020, I would like to request a ban on Confederate flags. A couple of years ago, many students decided to come to school dressed in them, put them on their cars, tied them to their backpacks. They wanted to make a statement. This flag represents hate. It's not about heritage. It's not freedom of speech. The First Amendment shouldn't be used to protect hate and racism. These students got away with it with no repercussions. Ever since, I've never gone longer than a few days without seeing a Confederate flag somewhere on campus. They make our school environment very hostile, very oppressive, especially for my Black classmates. Schools are supposed to be inclusive and comfortable for every single person who attends. You are not living up to the tagline on your website. In order to serve all students with excellence, you shouldn't allow hate demonstrations or speech in your schools. Thank you for your time.
This email is from Patrick Zagorski. To whom it may concern, I am writing in hopes that Indian River School District will follow the will of our great nation and ban the Confederate flag in our schools. Across the country, symbols of the Confederacy are being removed, and recently NASCAR has banned the Confederate flag. Institutions across America realize this is not heritage. Instead, it is a symbol of intolerance and hate. Now is this time to ban the Confederate flag in our schools.
This email was sent by Jacob, Rachel, and Mary Ann Zerby. To whom it may concern, it has come to my attention that the IRCSD allows Confederate flags to be worn and displayed in our schools. This symbol of racism, terror, and hate has no place in our diverse place of learning. My daughter will enter 6th grade this fall. She understands that in the year 2020, students are still permitted to inflame tensions by wearing and brandishing this traitor flag. She and I are both disgusted. Symbols of hate have no place in our community. Our family proudly stands with our Black brothers and sisters, and it is long past time to demand a change in this county and across our nation. Thank you for your prompt and honorable actions to permanently ban any hate symbols from our school campuses immediately.
This email is from Amy Stanley. Dear school board members, as a concerned parent and former student of Vero Beach High School, I'm reaching out to you today asking you to consider banning the display of the Confederate flag in Indian River County schools. The use of the Confederate flag in our school district has been used as a form of intimidation towards Black students based solely on their race. I cannot and do not want to imagine the fear these students must feel as they get ready for school each day. In our school district, no student should ever feel threatened because of the color of their skin. Racism and racial divide has been an issue in Indian River County schools since I was a student there, and it continues today. While there may be arguments for displaying the Confederate flag that sound justified, those same arguments could also be applied to gang symbols, and those are definitely not allowed. As recent events unfold in the world, we as a community must teach our children that hate symbols should never be proudly displayed and that everyone should feel safe to go to school in the morning. Thank you for time and consideration.
This email was received by Abigail Johnson. Hello, my name is Abigail Johnson, and I was a student of SDIRC from 2012 to 2019. Throughout middle school and high school, I noticed many students displaying a Confederate flag. This is a historical symbol of a period of our history where Black people were considered property and the rights of states to own. This is no longer the truth of the country, and even if it doesn't bother many students, it makes Black students in our school feel uncomfortable and unsafe. I have witnessed white students using these symbols to intimidate and make fun of Black students at VBHS, and the school district was quick to sweep racism in our schools under the rug. Although there is overt racism in our schools that is more regulated, there are also microaggressions that Black students have to endure each day by students, teachers, and staff on campus. This doesn't even cover the fact that the mascot is the racist and culturally inappropriate Fighting Indian. I am imploring the SDIRC to crack down on holding every single person on campus accountable for racism and microaggressions, using the Confederate flag and denouncing the Indian as a mascot on VBHS and Vero Beach Elementary School.
This email is from Deanna DeRosia. Hello, I am a Sebastian local, and I am writing to say that you should remove the Confederate flag and any and all Confederate symbolism from our schools in order to make them a safe space for all children. The Confederate flag does not represent culture or heritage. It represents a part of our history where a group of people tried to secede from the nation in order to keep enslaved people of color. Seeing this imagery is incredibly harmful to children who still feel the repercussions of this injustice in our country. And it is not only It is not only a poor decision to submit this part of our community to such pain, but outright foolish to continue to spread this imagery and further the ideology that this part of our history was okay. We can learn about this dark part of our history in books. We do not need flags and statues to memorialize it. Thank you.
This email was received by Nicole Linsky. Dear School District of Indian River County, it is my formal pleasure to express the freedom and liberty to write to you concerning the Confederate flag in our children's schools. This flag is a symbol of the chains and oppression of slavery that have been placed on several African American students' ancestors. It is a sign of disrespect for people of color and can easily be used by other students as a means to bully students that are of color in our school systems. I am in hopes that removing the Confederate flag from our schools is a step to ensure that our schools are a safe and positive learning environment for all students, despite the color of their skin. It is my request that we remove Confederate flags entirely from our country and hope that Indian River County schools can begin this process of hope and healing for our students of color. Thank you for your time.
I just wanted to note that we are reading these as written, even if there are errors. We're reading the errors as written in the emails. This email is from Alexandra McGee. Across the country, symbols of the Confederacy are being removed. Now is this time to ban the Confederate flag in our schools. Institutions across America realize this is not heritage. Instead, it is a symbol of intolerance and hate. It is not an attempt to erase history, but to remove the white supremacist lens that our history is viewed through, just as all Nazi symbolism is banned in Germany. The truth of our history needs to be taught, and these symbols need not be Romanized. Remove them from our schools.
This email was received from Mia Johnson. Good morning. I am emailing you in an effort to have the Confederate flag banned from our school district. As a teacher and parent in this district and building relationships with mostly all of my students who I am blessed to work with, there have been several conversations had with my minority students specifically, and my sons as well, who are also African American, where they have shared with me how the Confederate flag is being used by their peers as an intimidation tactic and to belittle them because of their race. How is this so? Why is this even an issue in our district at all? Then to be told by these same kids that they have went to school faculty and administrators expressing how this flag is being used and what it represents to them, and still not seeing anything done to change it is unacceptable. Why is the symbol of division and hate being allowed to be paraded around by students? And if they are being allowed to wear it, they should be taught properly on the history behind it and why it was created to begin with. We have a duty to protect and educate our kids properly and effectively and honestly. With all that is going on in our nation today regarding this very thing, this flag should have been banned from our district years ago. It really is sad that a lot of our minority students feel this way and nothing has been done at all to hear them out. In all, this flag does nothing but cause division between our student bodies. Our theme has been stronger together. I really do not believe we can live up to that theme if we allow this flag to stick around. My hope is that we can do what's best for our students and our minority teachers and staff too and ban this flag. By doing so, maybe we can become stronger together. Thank you for your time.
This is from Keely Coach. As a parent of a teenage male in this county, I am literally blown away by your willful ignorance as a school board. You should all be ashamed of yourselves. He, at 17, understands implicitly what that flag and its iterations stand for. If you think for a single second that every single student does not grasp the meaning, you are beyond wrong. But I think you all already know that. How is this even up for conversation or debate? It is 2020. The Confederacy lasted 5 years. That is 2 years less than the Golden Girls ran on television. Stop glorifying racism and calling it freedom of speech. This is enough. Remove it permanently from our schools. No ifs, ands, or buts. Just do it.
This email was sent by Adina Bernholtz. Dear Indian River School District, I am writing you as a current student of the district to ask you to please ban Confederate flags on all campuses and buildings. I have lived in Vero my whole life, and I love this town. Every day I feel to live in such a paradise. Our beautiful town should not be tainted with racist symbols. This commonly used Confederate flag with the blue X was created after the Confederacy lost the Civil War. Versions of this flag were created to be displayed across the South to represent white supremacy and dislike toward the ending of the Confederacy. It has blatant roots and disrespect with the United States of America. Thus, it has no place in our schools. We should celebrate our history, not symbols of disrespect to our nation. Sincerely.
This email is from Ashley Novander. Good morning. I am writing to provide my comments on today's discussion of the Confederate flag in schools in the district. Now is the time to act and capitalize on the momentum in this country to rectify pervasive racial injustices by regulating symbols of hate speech in our schools, including banning display of the Confederate flag. The district has the pedagogical interest to protect students from hate speech in schools, have the moral and legal obligation to protect each one, under the duty of in parenti locus. Please do your part to help all youth feel more welcome and safe in schools by removing this past relic that symbolizes the enslavement of humans. Thank you for your time and consideration. This email is from Paige Van Antwerp. Dear Superintendent Moore and board members, once again, I am writing to urge you to ban the Confederate flag and other hateful symbolism in our schools. Our students, all students, should feel that school is a nurturing place where their humanity and their history is not only acknowledged, but respected. Under this banner known as the Confederate flag, more people of color were lynched in Florida per capita than any other state in the country. Men, women, children, even an unborn child. If our educational leaders refuse to recognize that this is a symbol of murderous hate and, as such, not protected under the First Amendment, I fear not only for the well-being of our students, but our future. This email is from Melanie Atkins. I favor banning the display of the Confederate flag on school grounds by students and including that in the Student Code of Conduct outline. The use of the Confederate flag as a symbol of sentiment is a cheap, thoughtless act that serves only to create a reaction that divides a student body into camps. The motive is one of divisiveness. The symbol replaces communication and empathy, counterproductive for the concept of student body and education. The consequence for anyone who uses symbols to create division might be a course on communication skills, motives for bullying, reactionary behavior and proactive behavior, and emotional intelligence. These skills will serve students well into adulthood, positively changing behavior rather than hiding behind reactionary symbols that replace responsible thought. This email was received from Dean Shelley, and unfortunately the email was typed in the subject line, so it stops very abruptly. We did reach out, but we didn't receive a response that was in the body of the email. The Confederate flag. It really goes without saying as to why any black person would oppose allowing a symbol used to spew hate on any public school grounds that their children attend. As a taxpayer in this county, I oppose the notion of This email is from Samuel LePere. Dear SDIRC, I have been a resident of IRC almost my entire life. Having gone through the public school system and IRC personally, I do not think banning the waving of the Confederate flag in our schools would detract whatsoever from from our current and future students' learning experiences. I would go as far to say that it would behoove our students if any Confederate flag education and representation were placed entirely with increased lessons on Reconstruction in the post-Civil War era and how it affected Black culture up to today. Thank you for your consideration and your hard work. We're going to rotate out.
This email was received by Nicole Rodriguez, SDRC Board, and Dr. Moore. I am an SDRC parent living in Sebastian. I am vehemently opposed to anything depicting the Confederate flag being allowed in our schools. No flags, hats, shirts, or bumper stickers, no bandanas, no signs, nothing. The only place that image belongs is in a textbook that teaches the accurate, honest history behind it. This flag is considered a hate symbol by the Anti-Defamation League due to its use in the defense of institution of slavery during the Civil War. This battle flag stood for the fight of white people against the freedom of Black people. The Confederacy existed as an entity for less than 5 years. The Confederacy is not anyone's heritage. It was a blip on the radar that should serve as nothing but a learning opportunity for what not to do in the future. Please consider your Black and brown students. Consider the feelings they could experience if sat next to someone wearing a Confederate flag on their person. It could induce fear, anxiety, stress, and how is a child to learn when feeling that way? In addition to the reasons above, the flag has been adopted by several hate groups as a symbol of white pride and supremacy. Why would we allow this in our schools? This flag stands for nothing but to further divide our country and community. As a community, we are ravaged by racism systematically and socially, and it doesn't belong in our schools. You have the opportunity to be on the right side of history during this time. Please ban that flag in schools. Our kids deserve to learn peacefully in a hate-free, intimidation-free environment. Show our kids that we, as a community and as a school system, are standing up for what's right, and we're setting an example that these kids will remember. This is important.
This email is from Kelly Von Gau. Dear school board members, I would like this email read into the record of today's meeting. The Confederate flag was intended at its creation to represent white supremacy. While people think this is an arguable truth, it is not. Quote, as a national emblem, it, the Confederate flag, is significant of our higher cause, the cause of the superior race, end quote. William T. Thompson, April 28, 1863. The flag being allowed on campus simply because so many people refuse to believe the history behind it is abhorrent. I do not believe a single board member would strap a massive Confederate flag to their car and drive to this meeting. This is because you know better than to sow these seeds of division. Because you know it will be hurtful and intimidating to our Black coworkers. Because you know better. In September of 2017, white students circulated Snapchat posts featuring the Confederate flag with a call for all rednecks to wear it on clothing and their cars. These posts circulated featuring the text, "They gonna learn tomorrow." Black students woke up, saw the posts, and begged their parents to stay home. This was intentional use of racist symbols to intimidate Black students out of their education. If the flag isn't meant for this purpose, then why does our own student body use it for this purpose? Why does it show up at KKK rallies? Why do white men drive back and forth with the flag strapped to the back of their truck in front of BLM rallies? Why, when NASCAR banned the flag, was a noose found in a Black driver's garage? The answer is clearly that it is as much a racist symbol as the swastika. The only difference is that a misinformation campaign has spread the falsehood that it means something else. As an educational institution, you have a responsibility to teach children to know better and to be better. Our history books have glazed over the violent truths about slavery and racism for so long that it has failed to teach us not to repeat our mistakes. This needs to end. The Snapchats from 2017 circulated after a racially contentious summer following the protests in Charlottesville. This summer is proving to be even more racially divisive, and unless you act now to protect our student body, those divisive tones and racist rhetoric will be present on our campuses this fall. Every student in Indian River County deserves to feel safe and included on school property. The misinformed deserve to be better educated before they take their misinformation elsewhere and cause harm to themselves and others. It's time to take a strong stance against the Confederate flag and ban it from the entirety
This email was received from Thomas Footman. The Confederate flag has never brought unity, but division amongst black and white people. And for this flag, which represents division, to be worn on any attire or flown on the grounds of any school or public place would be very offensive. We, the people of this country, stand for change. Progressing is essential for us to be truly one nation under God.
This is the last email. This is from Enrique Valencia. Dear school board member, 16 years ago, SRHS was founded on the proposition that innovation through excellence would create equality for all members, past, present, and future. To wit, we would like to share the following information regarding Mrs. Kelly Ward, assistant principal for the past 12 years at SRHS. As members of the SRHS Guidance Department for many years, we have had the pleasure of successfully working with Mrs. Ward in the areas of curriculum and instruction, master schedule, state, benchmark, SAT, and ACT assessment testing, gradebook and course history transcripts, FLDOE reports, FTE, SRHS data survey updates, and student enrollment, withdrawal procedures, and documentation procedures. Here are some of the observations that reflect the high professional skill set in all areas of coordination, mentoring, and effective oral written communication with all staff, students, and parents, exemplified by Kelly. Kelly is highly committed to the assessment testing preparation process, given of her own free time, making thousands of tickets at night for state assessment testing. Over the past 12 years, Kelly has developed a professional family system that works for all, with knowledge of SRHS students, parents, teachers, facilities, and guidance. Kelly has done a great job coordinating grading efforts with teachers and the registrar. She has worked diligently to assist teachers in meeting grading deadlines and providing guidance to teachers relating to complex focused gradebook questions. Kelly speaks so well to students, parents, and staff. She is consistent, fair, and always calm in any circumstance. Her calm, encouraging Southern charm and hospitality is evident. In all ways, she continues to be positive. Kelly staying at SRHS brings consistency, especially in this uncertain time of the many changes, when students and staff will need her support. She does announcements every morning with heartfelt humor, iconic sharkdom legacy amongst staff and students. Kelly is always willing to listen to our concerns, and she knows us. She always has our backs when working through issues and concerns in a timely fashion. Kelly has a true, sincere, and enduring connection at SRHS. It takes years to develop knowledge of a school and connect with staff and students. For SRHS to work toward an A school status, Mrs. Ward and Mr. Thimmer would both be highly effective and instrumental, together assigned to SRHS for the upcoming school year. In closing, please give full consideration to the proposition that Mrs. Ward stay at SRHS for the 2021 school year. As always, we will strive. Those are all of the emails that we received.
Okay. So do we want to reserve our comments until we get into the item, board members, on this? Because normally we speak sometimes on public input.
We're on the discussion now. Why don't we just go straight into it? Can we do that?
Because we have that item 7A, I believe it is, that we had voted in that order. So my question is on the code of conduct, if you want to, we can wait until then. Was there any other comments on any of the other public input that we wanted to comment on? I just want to make a comment on Mrs. Seidel's. I feel that I need to say that I feel that this person is bringing this forward to the board because of the actions of the board member going out into these public situations speaking on this, and I have a preference that the board member does not do that because it's going to just keep going back and forth. And I think this case has cost us already $30,000, and
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Madam Chair. When you say this board member, you mean Mrs. Justice?
yes.
Okay.
And I'm afraid if that continues, that this person will file a lawsuit against the district, and that's my concern, and with the board member continuing to go out and speak about this on the radio and other areas. So I have that deep concern. And I wish it would stop on both sides. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into 7A.
All right. You want me to go? We're going to go ahead. As Mr. Fagan comes back to the podium, I'm asking him to explain the additional information that was sent. We did send an email after doing some research and providing some clarification, making a slight modification to the item. But by no means were you provided enough time because that email was sent just as the meeting was starting. So I'd ask Mr. Fagan to present A7 again, as he did in workshop, and we'll take the time to respond to any questions or concerns to ensure we have a level of clarity to give comfort to our board that this is an item worth supporting. Mr. Fagan.
Thanks, Luke. Through the chair. Through the chair.
Ron, I don't think you're on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Moore, I'm sorry, Mr. Fagan, did you say that you sent it tonight?
Yes, ma'am.
Before the meeting? Okay.
Is it, I'm going to try to pull it up.
Okay, thank you.
556.
Which is the explanation as to
pull it
why
up.
you certainly did not have enough time to review it.
Okay, hold on. 556.
You work pretty fast, Mr. Fagan.
Told you.
I don't see it.
That'd probably be a good idea.
Oh, my God.
We can do the consent agenda.
What do you want to do?
Do the consent agenda.
Okay.
I can't read emails.
Actually, that's what we need to do anyways. I'm out of order, board members. But this gives us plenty of time to have Mr. Fagan go and grab the copies. So at this time, we're going to move into the consent while we give time for Mr. Fagan to go get us the items we need. Board members, I need approval. I need a motion for the consent items.
Make a motion.
Does that, is this include, I'm totally lost.
Yes, I'm sorry. Citizen input went longer than normal.
Right.
We're going into item 4, category 4, consent agenda. That's where we need to be.
Okay.
And then Mr. Fagan will jump into the
7A.
action 7A, and then we'll jump into the public hearing.
And the code of conduct after?
Yes, that's-
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
No. Okay, so I have Mrs. Berenborg with the motion, and then I need a second.
A second.
Mrs. Rosario with a second. Mrs. Berenborg, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of changes that have taken place that we just approved, and I encourage anyone in the public who has not already listened to or saw our earlier, the superintendent's workshop. Lots of details were given as to the reorganization moving forward and the changes, the good changes that we are moving into for the school year 2020, 2021. Personnel recommendations are there. Dr. Moore is going to release the organizational chart, and the salary book schedule has been changed so that across the board there is equity and fairness with all of our employees. So I am excited. It is a lot of work that we, board members, have not, I cannot take credit for it. Dr. Moore and all of the assistant superintendents and leadership have really worked really hard, even during COVID time, to ensure that all of these changes have taken place. There is a description in the organizational presentation that Dr. Moore actually narrated exactly how and why the thought processes were, or his thought processes for the changes, so I encourage anybody to read those. So I'm excited for what is to come, and I want to thank you once again publicly during the board meeting, all of you, for all of your hard work. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
I would just like to say, I know we've got a lot of emails about some of the personnel changes. And I want to just say that I have spoken, I personally, and I can't speak for other board members, but have spoken to Dr. Moore about these and about the concerns that have been addressed. And want to let people know that we take these concerns seriously. We've heard them. We've looked at them. We've had a lot of conversations about them. As a board member, as was discussed in this afternoon's workshop, Mrs. Rosario, I think it was mentioned, that it is our job as board members to set policy, to set vision, to oversee certain things in the district, but it is not to micromanage the day-to-day operations, and that's why we have our CEO, Dr. Moore. And so in that, I want to say I've spoken about those. I know the individuals. I take those concerns seriously. And I do understand that there is a difference in looking at the needs of individual schools and what certain people represent to individual schools, and the 30,000 feet up look that it takes to understand the needs of the district as a whole. And sometimes those needs of the district as a whole don't seem to make as much sense in individual schools as they do from a broader perspective. So I support the changes, although I do know that they represent some hardship for some schools and some people in those schools, and I acknowledge and am sensitive to those, and trust that as we go through this difficult period of reorganization and restructuring our schools and our district, that's a hard moment to go through. And I trust that it is in the best interest of that we will be looking back at this moment and other moments 3 and 4 and 5 years from now and see a district that works better than it ever has before. And I trust Dr. Moore in that, and I trust what it takes to make some of these really difficult decisions.
Thank you.
And I'm not speaking to the district reorganization or other stuff. We spent hours talking about that this afternoon. As Mrs. Rosario said, you can go back and watch that video if you're interested, or speak with any of us individually, who I believe will be happy to answer questions.
Mrs. Berenborg?
Yes, I was going to save my comments until members matter about what Dr. Schiff was just referring to. However, I do want to make a quick comment because I didn't speak to it just because I wanted the meeting to kind of flow a little bit before I spoke to that. But I do want to say it is a lot of work that we've undergone. We have hired Dr. Moore to be a change agent. And I know from this afternoon's discussion, all of us wish to help him with being a change agent. And I know change is hard sometimes with some people. I did respond individually to each person that emailed me. If I didn't, I probably didn't get your email to respond, so feel free to reach out. But I do understand those concerns when you do disrupt administration at a school. However, I do know that the only way we're going to get better and our district is to make change. So thank you.
Okay. So, no, actually, this is good timing. We gave you time. We had to get through consent, so perfect. Any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0. Okay, so that was perfect. Because I did not receive it, I was trying to look for it. So thank you for running and grabbing these. Before we jump in the item, can give a few minutes, just a couple of minutes to take a look real quick? I've not been able to look at this before I guess you can start talking about it.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. Just so everyone is on the same page, we are now on item 7A, which is approval of recurring critical district-wide expenditure requirements for the 2021 school year. During the workshop today, the board had additional inquiries regarding some of the limits of authorization, at which time I asked Mr. Fagan to go back and do additional research to provide additional clarification to the board. The information that was just passed out to board members will be uploaded within the item, so that information will be available to the public to review, as well as the slight modification to the item based on the research in which we've done. At this time, I will ask Mr. Fagan to provide a detailed explanation of this report in comparison to the shifts or changes that were provided as a result of the additional information being provided.
Thank you, Sue. To the chair. I, pursuant to the workshop, went back in and got some more additional information for each line item. So starting at the top, Scrimp Insurance increases approximately $324,000, and this is basically an increase in overall insurance premium policies for auto, liability, property casualty, and workers' comp. Industry averages is running somewhere between 7% and 9%. Our overall increase was 7.68%, which is approximately $300,000 above the prior year approval.
Okay.
Second item is U.S. Foods. Request for 2021 was $2.5 million. Prior year request was also $2.5 million. However, there was a little bit less in expenditures. The primary reason for the lack of expenditures was because of the pandemic and the coronavirus. There was less meals being served. Also, a secondary item, we began buying some of our bread and foodstuff products from Flowers Bread as a trial basis. So that shifted some expenditures from U.S. Foods to Flowers. Flowers has a program where we can buy less and less per serving, so therefore we don't have so much in inventory. That was on a one-year trial basis. However, the virus came in and kind of interrupted that trial effort. So therefore, that request increase is the same amount as last year of $2.5 million. Third item is CW Government, LLC. This is for technology, equipment, and purchases for laptops, memory, cables, projectors, and hard drive. Same amount as last year, $900,000. Request for this year is $900,000. Spent approximately $824,000 year to date. Florida School Book Depository, $1.8 million this year, $1.7 million last year. Expenditure was $729,000. However, working with curriculum, we believe that in response to the COVID and the requirements for textbooks next year and the textbook adoption, we believe this $1.8 million is the maximum we'll need, but we may need it because of shifting requirements in next year's curriculum instruction program. And that's an $80,000 increase over prior year. Third item is train air conditioning. It was $1.5 million last year, $300,000 this year, $600,000 year-to-date. What was missing from the analysis in this one is approximately $1.3 million of work to be done that has not been executed yet, and that work may flow over into next year for doing capital replacements for chillers and projections, and therefore the increase for next year was to account for that increase.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Do I have to do comment? I'm okay.
Go ahead, Mrs. Rosario.
I don't know if I'm supposed to put comment or not, but okay.
She's
Comment.
new to the live environment.
Yeah, I know. And then Mr. Fagan talks so fast, I want to get in there before he moves on to the next 5 items. Mr. Fagan, the 1.3 million that we did not use this year, you said that there was 1.3 million that we scheduled to use this year, we didn't use it yet.
Correct. We haven't made the payments yet. So that will roll over in the next year. Therefore, that'll make that a 2021 purchase, and therefore, that's why I need the $3 million. I have to pay bill.
That would have been 2.8.
Plus, I'm going to have some additional purchases next year.
Okay. And these come out of capital, right?
Yes, ma'am. Keep in mind, these are also requests for approval, not necessarily a budgeted line item.
Okay.
Next year, the budget, when we get into the actual capital budget, that could change and that requirement could go down, but at least we still have the $3 million purchasing approval.
But I thought we already approved next year's capital budget.
No, ma'am. Not 2021, no, ma'am.
What did we look at recently with the capital budget? We looked at the
Capital improvement.
the capital improvement, okay.
That would have been for 1920, not this year, not next year.
Those were updates for this year.
Yes, ma'am.
Got it.
Next item is United Data Technologies. This is a new item. This item was not on the vendor list last year. It's $900,000, and this is just an additional outlet for technology to buy technology-related equipment. Case in point, this is the vendor we use for the Chromebooks that we recently purchased for $1.6 million. In the world of technology, there's 3 of them on this list. Sometimes when you have a requirement, you want to put it out to bid for these 3 because we can bid directly, and sometimes you will bid them against each other to who can give you the best service for the least amount of price. Therefore, having all 3 on the list allows us to have that flexibility. First, fire and security, it's $250,000 in the prior year, it's $250,000 this year, and therefore there's no increase there. We did spend $450,000 per the report. However, that increase is because of the replacement of the fire system at Sebastian River High School. That was on a separate agenda item. That allowed us to allow that particular line increase. Next item is Presidio Network Solutions, another technology provider for projects. They provide technology and equipment. Again, it's a $500,000 request for 2021, and it was the same for 1920. Again, it's another outlet to purchase equipment for schools and district. AmeriGas, $485,000 compared to $450 for the prior year, $302 currently. The reason that number is less than the $450 is because of COVID. We have used less LPG gas for the buses, and also we have 10 initial buses for next year. So we're anticipating a full run next year, therefore a little slight increase of $35,000. Roberts Produce, this is part of the food service program. It is $500,000 for this year, $500,000 for the prior year. Year-to-date was $252,000. The reason it is less is partly due to COVID, but also partly because we can get fresh vegetables and fruits from the Department of Agriculture and to the Department of Defense. However, that stream is not always reliable. In 1920, it was reliable, and we were able to reduce the purchases from Roberts Produce. But in preparation for next year's requirements for food services to the children, we want to make sure we have sufficient capacity within that to go them if the fruits and vegetables at the Department of Agriculture and DOD are not available. Very similar to the technology. We need multiple sources to make sure we can provide necessary services to all students. Mobile modular was not on the list last year. It's $400,000. $241,000 been spent year to date, and what that consists of is portable leasing. We have several portables in the district, approximately 19. Plus, we also have a contingency in case a hurricane comes. We also want to have the ability, if some damage was done to any schools, we could immediately go out and secure portables and deliver them to any site in case of an emergency. M&B products, $300,000, same amount as prior year. This is juice for the food service program. Same reasoning, there was, because of the virus, we bought less. Also, we can buy juice through U.S. Department of Agriculture and DOD products if it's available. We were able to use some of that this year. However, in planning for next year to make sure we have plenty of capacity, we have that there as a $300,000 basically contingency. If we can't get fruit juice from one source, we won't have the ability to go to another source. Manpower. Same reasoning here, 134 spent year to date, 250 for both year request. The reason it is less actual is because you have 11 weeks of less productivity, and therefore we did not need their services. Also, they are a backup plan in case of emergency regarding a hurricane or flooding at a school. First Financial Administrators. This is a third-party service provided for people who elect to do a deferred compensation program. It is basically a pass-through through the district. We deduct from your paycheck and send to the provider. $34,000 increase from the prior year. E&G Environmental. Same scenario, impacted because of the coronavirus. It is also, you did not have any major hurricanes last year. This company comes in after a hurricane and helps us disinfect all the shelters upon closure in order to get preparation for the opening of school. Since you had minimum hurricane, therefore you had minimum expenditures here. The 150 is anticipation, should we need them this year. IB program, enrollment for IB program, and instructional materials and testing for students. Testing was not conducted this year, therefore the fees were less. This is in preparation of next year at a full cycle and full testing. Glover Oil, same scenario. This is for your white fleet.
Can I ask a question on IB?
Yes, ma'am.
I asked you earlier, do we get some sort of rebate or something when kids pass the IB exam?
To the chair, what we get when they pass the chairs, pass the test, we get additional FTE when they take the class and pass the class, and that comes in through the FEFP. So you get additional revenue.
And where does that money go once it's given back to the district?
Revenue goes into the district, and then it is funneled back to the program in order to cover testing materials and bonuses to the teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Granger, $125,000 prior year, only spent 61 year to date. This is primarily for maintenance parts and doing work orders at the school. Since we were closed for 11 weeks, that decreased the requirements for those parts. The $125,000 is anticipation of next year. Flowers Bakery, again, food service, $400,000. This is a correction on the agenda item that was presented this afternoon at 1. There was a $400,000 request for 1920. We want to adjust that downward to $250,000. Prior year actual expenditures were 52. The reason for the decrease is because of COVID, less requirements, less expenditures, and also because we bought less because you could buy less in bulk, and therefore you had a less per cost serving, so we didn't have to buy so much and store it. Therefore, the overall requirement went down. Martin Finn.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yes.
Sorry, for
Yes.
the whole comment thing. I'm still a little confused on this one, although I understand your explanation. Asking for 400,000, encumbering 400,000 to spend 52,000, to then decrease the encumbrance to 250,000 is still, what is that, 5 times the amount that we spent? That seems like an awful lot. Is that, can you say, it's a huge amount more than was, I get that things changed because of COVID and how we used food and stuff was dramatically different. So without context of previous years, this is hard to follow. But it still seems like an enormous encumbrance unless, I don't, maybe in previous years without the schools closing for COVID, we really do spend 250 to 400,000 on baked goods. I'm still a little confused on that one.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. First off, let me say that this requirement here is not necessarily an encumbrance. It's an authorization to encumber. So we will not be going out on July 1 and issuing a PO, purchase order to Flowers for $400,000. These are based on basically requirements that we occur through the year, and we will encumber those funds and request that product from the Flowers. Also with Flowers, remember, it works in concert with the two other vendors, U.S. Foods and the produce company. No, excuse me, just U.S. Foods. If we buy more from U.S. Foods, we'll buy less from Flowers. If we buy more fresh goods from Flowers, that will go up, and U.S. Foods will go down because most of that is bought frozen. So they work in concert, not necessarily run in parallel with each other. It doesn't mean I'm going to spend both. We're going to spend what we need to meet our requirements where we can get the best utilization of our funds. Yes.
That was a helpful distinction you just made between, I forgot the word you used, but an encumbrance and the other thing. So this is not money in any of these categories that is being formally encumbered for these expenses, correct?
That is correct. This is just you, the board, given the district the authority to go above the superintendent's $50,000. Should we need these services, we can use those services. If we don't need these services, we will not encumber these services. Or if we can get a better deal somewhere else, we will go there. It just allows us to move quickly for the start of school and during the school should we need them. As an example, if there were a hurricane and we needed someone to come and help clean the schools after the shelters, we may have to come back and say, we wouldn't want to have an emergency agenda item for you to authorize us to go engage someone. This allows us to have that in our back pocket should we need it.
Got it. And so this money remains in the general fund unless it's a capital expense in the capital fund until such time as you need it, and this just gives you authorization to take it from the relevant fund to use without having to come back to the board on an emergency basis for approval. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct, but also for capital fund, general fund, food service fund, any fund that uses these services, they will be in their appropriate budget.
Got it. Thank you. That's helpful.
Mrs. Rosario?
Mr. Fagan, but okay, so last year, the request was for $400,000. We used 52,000, approximate. So there's 350,000 that is the difference between those two.
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
So if we didn't use about a little less than 350,000, the 250,000 that you're requesting for us to give the authority to be budgeted, to be encumbered.
No, ma'am.
What's the word?
Authorized.
Authorized. The 250 that you're requesting to be authorized for this category would essentially come out of that 350,000 that was not used.
To the chair, no, ma'am.
Or
That would be a
something
whole
like
new
that.
budget setup.
Okay.
So this doesn't roll over. It'd be a whole new budget would be set up, and if we needed 250,000 from Flowers, we would issue that PO as we went along during the year. They don't roll over per se. That's why we come to you every year and ask for a new authorization.
It just seems so much from last year. I mean, that's fine. I understand it now.
Okay.
I just don't know where 400,000 came for last year.
If I would
know what I mean?
we didn't have time to go back and look at 17, 18, and 18, 19
Yeah.
to see what you actually spent
Yeah.
to do that.
And we didn't use it anyway.
Correct.
We only used 52,000,
Right.
which is good, but,
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
okay, thank you.
Martin Fence was not on the list. It was a separate contract, and there'll be an item coming forth sometime this year to secure those services going forward. And advanced placement, same item, reduced because of COVID, and it's expected that when the fees return and everything next year, we'll be back up to the $160,000 requirement. So once again, if I can reiterate, this is just an authorization to expend. It's not, we're not encumbering the money, we're not spending the money unless it's absolutely necessary and is properly budgeted in next year's budget.
Mrs. Rosario?
So
then I have a question.
am I to understand that from this afternoon, the requested authorized amount would have been $17 million?
Yes, ma'am.
The requested changes from this afternoon to now are less than the 17 million, 16,876,000.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
So we're essentially, from this morning to now, saving somewhere about $200,000.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
I do, oh, are you done? Sorry.
Sorry.
Mrs. Barrenborg?
Yes, I wanted to say thank you for this clarity. I think we've been a little shy on this type of topic because of past issues. Not because of you, Mr. Fagan, but I think it's very important that you give us this kind of detailed information so that we feel comfortable in allowing those monies to go into those budgets. I understand that they're not being spent right now. We understand that this is just giving you the allowance to do so. We just know that in the past that has been an issue, so you need to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have Mrs. Diagresta. Skirmp. Sorry, I don't like saying that word. Remind us what the initials of that is for.
South Central Educational Risk Management Program.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to mention this because if we have an opportunity of trying to save money in the future, I want to make sure that we understand this. This is basically like a group, we get together with other school districts, and this is basically like a self-insurance fund. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, Mr. Fagan actually oversees the program, but it is a consortium, I think, of 7 or 8 school boards in Florida that pool their risk. Some of it is a self-insured program. Some of it you actually do buy insurance policies. For instance, your errors and omissions policy. You actually have an insurance policy that covers some things, but your property is self-insured. Your workers' comp program is also through that consortium. So it is a comprehensive risk management plan to cover the risk of the school boards that participate in it.
So I just want to ask, if we did have an employee who come back and sued the district, would it come out of this SCRM, or would it come out of our general fund?
It will depend. It would be processed through this insurance consortium. The claim would be processed through the consortium. Depending upon the type of lawsuit that was filed, it may be under the self-insured portion, or it may be under the actual insurance policy coverage. So it depends. I know you love it when lawyers say that, but it depends on what's actually filed.
Okay. And this is exactly why I have that concern that the one issue that keeps being brought up, that I know that this is an area that the employee could come back and utilize, based on what she feels her legal claims are. It's totally possible. So that's why I think it's so important that we not agitate the situation so that we don't get sued by a past employee. That's all I'm going to say on this, because this is right here where we can save money and not have lawsuits, and that's in our control.
Through the chair, less claims means less of an increase.
Exactly.
And Mrs. Zorka, I forgot to add that you do have a $25,000 deductible on that insurance policy. So that is a little off the top. You pay up to $25,000 first as your deductible, and then the insurance kicks in. I forgot that piece.
Okay.
Sorry.
Annually, correct?
Per claim, $25,000
Per claim?
Yes.
But even though it's a 25,000 per claim, it still is incorporated and calculated in our and what we have to pay. Exactly. All right, that's all.
That's the item.
I guess we need to, I need a motion for approval. If board members are ready to approve it.
Make a motion.
Okay. Mrs. Rosario makes a motion. I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay. I heard Mrs. Berenborg, so we'll have Mrs. Berenborg with a second. Would you like to speak to your motion?
I just wanted, yes, please. I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Fagan, for getting this done so quickly. And Dr. Moore for understanding the need to explain this to us a little bit more. I am sure, if I can speak on behalf of my fellow board members, with all the due respect, it doesn't mean that we don't trust that the work is getting done. It's that, just as Mrs. Berenborg mentioned earlier, there's just going to be a lot more. So I'm actually going to probably need a little bit of reminder on some of these things when we go through the budget process, which I am anticipating is going to be very soon.
Absolutely.
Because these are the items that should show up on our budget process. Dr. Moore, I do have a quick question for you.
All right.
And it might be just, I don't know if it would be rhetorical or if there's an answer. If not, you can always tell me that you'll get back to me on that. Much of these items here are facilities and maintenance costs, right? Things like oil, the manpower, the fencing, right? A lot of that is, and since many of these items seem to fall, the financial part of it seemed to fall under Mr. Fagan, would these be the type of position that would fall under Mr. Fagan in the organizational chart, in the org, the district-wide?
Through the chair, not at this time. This is an item where we're creating the budgets and providing the ability in which we have to spend, and the actual implementation of who's spending those funds, once approved by Mr. Fagan, ultimately by this board, they will be the ones implementing that particular action. So we, in our values-based budget system, everything begins in one central point, which is Chief Financial Officer, his team authorizing those funds and ensuring that other individual offices and departments don't exceed those budgeted funds.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Mrs. Berenborg, did you have any for your second? Did you want to speak?
No, I just told him my concerns earlier. We're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other discussion on this item? No? All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4-0. Okay. Now we're going to move into our, it's 12C, action agenda. And this is going to be, let me get there. This is action C, public hearing of adoption of revisions to the Code of Conduct Handbook effective for 2020 through 2021 school year. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, want to acknowledge and thank the speakers for either coming in and speaking or submitting their emails to be read. For me, this is an opportunity really to ensure that my walk and my talk are aligned. And in seeking the opportunity to become a superintendent, as I said in my interview process, the opportunity to come and have influence on a system that's been under desegregation order was something that was appealing to me. To have that opportunity to bring about change, to bring unity, to have a positive impact on a community coming from a diverse community where it was a minority district, living in diversity, where diversity was seen as a system of enrichment, a system of wealth within the community. The diversity made Miami a better place to live. So coming here and hearing some of the stories that I was not aware of at the onset, and not in alignment with what I had seen in schools and not what I had seen in interactions of students within our schools, I was taken back. And then when we look at things that we are ultimately working on to improve the quality of instruction within our system, I come to the realization that, as I have said many times before, learning is secondary to how individuals feel within the space in which they are learning. And if they cannot come into a school and feel safe, feel comfortable, feel valued, loved, be seen as equals, the best of instruction will not have the impact in which it's intended to have. And that as we begin to plan for a Unity Week and we begin to identify and learn who we are as adults through the implementation of the African American Achievement Plan, which is very detailed. And as a result of that implementation, we have learned a great deal about ourselves and where we need to, as a system, improve. But this is an opportunity to make a simple adjustment, not infringing on any freedom of speech or freedom of expression, but to ensure the children who belong to their parents, their mothers, their fathers, regardless of their background, regardless of their religion, regardless of their ethnicity or their gender, when they entrust their most prized possessions to us, we are an extension of that home. And just as those parents want their children to feel safe and feel comfortable and valued in their home, so how they should feel in our schools. We need to ensure that that is the environment in which we're providing. As a son, as a father, as a husband, as a systems leader, as a former principal, a former counselor, a teacher, I know the value of what unity brings, and I know how hard it is to work towards unity. And I know it's not easy to do, but I know the rewards of what can happen when we all come together to ensure our children in our schools view our schools and the adults within our schools as caring, loving individuals, and they're walking into a safe space. So in my own reflection of my own actions and the things that I've committed to you as a board and things I've said I would do amongst this community to ensure that we bring equity to the forefront, I found discomfort in things that were missing within the policy, which is the code of conduct. And as such, I'm going to ask Ms. Dampier to read a statement that I would ask for you to consider, including into the code of conduct.
Through the chair. The school district is committed to providing an educational setting that is safe, secure, and free from offensive conduct, harassment, and bullying for all of our students and school employees. Unlawful bullying and harassment, cyberbullying, sexual cyberbullying, hazing, dating violence and abuse, biased behavior, unlawful discriminatory harassment of protected classes, and gang-related activities of any type will not be permitted. Students shall not racially harass or intimidate others by name-calling, using derogatory slurs, wearing or possession of items depicting or implying hatred or prejudice. Students shall not, at school, on school board property, or at school-sponsored activities, display or transmit in any medium, including clothing, jewelry, posters, stickers, flyers, or buttons, writings, images, or symbols that are reasonably expected to be divisive, demeaning, or offensive to any person or group of disruptive to the learning environment, including but not limited to writings, images, or symbols associated with hate groups that are obscene, slanderous, or libelous, that are associated with intimidation, violence, or violent groups which advocate racial, ethnic, or religious prejudice. items that promote intolerance or confrontation, including the Confederate flag or swastika, or that degenerate others on the basis of race, color, religion, creed, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, or disability. Images and symbols covered by this policy are permissible in library or approved learning materials or in a classroom setting, example, a history class discussion of the Civil War or World War II as part of a learning assignment supervised by a teacher. Schools shall appropriately identify, report, investigate, and respond to situations of bullying, harassment, cyberbullying, sexual cyberbullying, hazing, dating violence and abuse, biased behavior, and gang-related activities of any type. This applies whether incidents occur on school grounds, at school-sponsored events, through school computer networks, off school grounds, or in any way that have an impact on school safety and positive school climate. To ensure a bully-free school environment, schools shall practice the following. Number 1, identify where and when bullying occurs. Number 2, train all school personnel to recognize bullying. Number 3, increase adult supervision at campus hotspots. Number 4, create an anti-bullying task force charged with educating students and staff. And number 5, integrate anti-bullying materials into curriculum for discussion and role play.
Thank you, Ms. Dampier. I believe that statement, which is found on page 23 of the Code of Conduct, being included in the document allows us the opportunity to bring a level of awareness while in the confines of a classroom to teach and to educate, which is our charge, while at the same time providing an environment for all students to feel safe, valued, respected within the confines of the schools in which we are charged for leading throughout our community. So my recommendation to this board is to include that item, that statement within our Code of Conduct. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. So we are in the public hearing portion, so.
No.
No?
No.
This is revisions.
Re-
Next
Or-
one will be a revision.
July.
Okay, so we can't have discussion at this time. Okay,
Can we provide feedback?
excuse me?
Comment to Dr. Moore? Oh, okay.
So we'll have Dr. Schiff first.
Thank you. I think Mrs. Berenborg was actually before me.
No?
What?
That's okay, go ahead.
All right. And I'm not sure if this is quite the right moment, but to read into the record, or we want to do that later, but as long as we're on the topic and as long as this is a long evening on this, this is going to be the moment, unless, Madam Chair, you tell me there's another moment.
No, go ahead.
All right, so I just want to say I wasn't on this board when this issue was last addressed previously in 2016 or when the DSEG order was legally fought. But I can assure the board and I can assure the public, and thank you to everybody who came and spoke, that I would have felt, spoken, and acted exactly the same way then as I do now. I concur with the people who spoke earlier that it's absurd that we're still talking about this in 2020. I wholeheartedly, unabashedly, fundamentally support banning the Confederate flag from our schools, our offices, our properties. To the argument that we're erasing history, I respond that no, we're not. Of course, history will continue to be taught in our schools under the supervision of qualified teachers who will present the full heinous history of the events leading to the American Civil War. To those who are arguing that we are misrepresenting the meaning of this flag, I respond again that no, we are not. As several of our speakers mentioned earlier, this was a flag that underwent a variety of modifications and was in use for merely 5 years. But frankly, more importantly, what this is about is what it represents. Flags are symbolic. That's their primary purpose. And if you've never walked in the skin of a marginalized, persecuted group, then you have no idea what it feels like, and you cannot pretend to speak for the experiences of its members. When they tell us what it feels like and the pain that it invokes, we should listen closely, deeply, and reverently. I will say that my experience as a Jewish American has given me only a very small taste of what it feels like to be excluded and marginalized. And I won't go into the details of those experiences or my family history here, nor do I mean to equate those experiences with those of our Black community. However, I do continue to experience evidence of that exclusion in my life here to this day. And suffice it to say that if I saw swastikas on my colleagues' clothing, car, or elsewhere in my school or work environment, you can bet I'd feel threatened, harassed, angry, and more at the blatant disregard for the impact that such a hate symbol would have on me and others like me. In this instance, while talking about the code of conduct, addressing this in the code of conduct is a step in the right direction, and it's not enough. Dr. Moore and I have spoken about this many, many times. As one speaker mentioned, it's a baby step, not a final step. And I do believe we need to build attention to this throughout district policy and practice. And as we affirmed in our racial equity policy earlier this year, we need to look at everything we do in this district through a racial equity lens. I would support strengthening that racial equity policy, reviewing other district policy, procedure, and academic curriculum to ensure that we pay consistent and vigilant attention to this and all issues of racial equity in this school district. We need to be leaders here, not simply enforce a discriminatory status quo in Florida schools, and we have an opportunity to step up and to step out in ways that few are responding to in school districts around the country. So I encourage us to take this step as a first step, not as a final step, and I will say that I fundamentally support this change in the code of conduct, and I support us going much further as we continue to do this work in the district. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sheff. Mrs. Rosario?
Dr. Moore, I have three suggestions that would align with, well, two of which would align with many of the comments that came from our citizens today. The first one is in the second paragraph on page 23, the second line begins with including, and it says including clothing, jewelry, posters, stickers, flyers, or buttons, writings, images, or symbols. What has been a recurring request has been the word hate, to include hate symbols, not just symbols.
Okay.
Right, so it would read writings, images, or hate symbols that are reasonably expected to be divisive. The other thing that that I don't see here that has been that I've heard over and over again were flags on cars. So is it possible for us to include somewhere a line or so that would include something to the effect of these would be these policies would include not just on campus, physically on campus here, but also at school-related functions like sports events where our school or their school is being represented, or after-school programs, field trips, things like that.
As I read the statement, I believe we captured it because it's on the school campus. I would defer to the attorney if we're not capturing. I think your concern is things within cars or automobiles while on our campus. I think we've addressed it as it not being appropriate.
May I, Mrs. Orr? At the, Mrs. Rosario, if you look towards the bottom of page 23, you will see the language refers to it applying to on school grounds at school-sponsored events. And so that would capture the behaviors that you're discussing where there is a sanctioned athletic event and our students are there.
Even if it's off campus?
Yes, it's still a school-sponsored event.
All right. Okay. And then the other thing is, it is something that I believe if I know you well enough, Dr. Moore, you're probably going to say that will be addressed, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to ask will be addressed through the training and facilitating of our, moving forward with all the changes and establishing systems and policies. And that would be to ensure that when an item is being taught, when images and symbols covered by this policy are permissible in libraries, in school libraries, if they are available and taught through approved learning materials, I would like to be very clear moving forward that it should be approved curriculum, district curriculum, approved and not taught unbiasedly. I mean, not taught with maybe a personal bias, but when we're teaching history, we're teaching facts. I want to be able to make sure that we've got that straight so that when we are teaching history, it is indeed the history, not our personal opinions.
Through the chair, I absolutely agree, and we will provide that support and continue to grow that instruction as we move forward.
Okay. I want to read something that, to continue with my comments here. I didn't bring this up at our last meeting, but I have not had a chance to share my thoughts on this, and I want to be able to read what I have here. It's very short. It goes in line with what Dr. Schiff mentioned before, that myself, Mrs. Barenborg, and Dr. Schiff were not on the board during the last discussion whenever this came to the board. I think it was in 2017. Not being part of that discussion, also one of the several questions from citizens today asked why. Why are we still discussing this? Why is it still an issue? And my personal answer is, I don't know. I personally do not know why this has still been an issue. Sadly, I don't have an answer to that, unfortunately. Just the same way that I do not have an answer to why we're still under a segregation order. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to become a board member when I ran for this seat in 2018. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to hire Dr. Moore, because I believe that he was the leader to get us out of this mess that we're in. But we are headed in the right direction, and changing this policy today is a step in the right direction. The very definition of racism is prejudice. It's discrimination or antagonism. It is the opposition directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular race, racial, or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or is marginalized. This is not a definition that I think that we are unfamiliar with as a society. The theories of racism exist as a belief that different races possess different characteristics, abilities, or qualities. These differences distinguish one group of people from another as being inferior or superior, and these differences should never be embraced. Hate of any kind should never be tolerated or accepted or allowed on any level, especially not in our schools. For many, the Confederate flag brings that same ill feeling and anxiety, such as gang paraphernalia, the swastika, the Iron Cross, the blood drop cross. All of these bring about unsettled feelings. These are all symbols of hate that should never be welcomed on our school campuses. I believe we should ban the Confederate flag in our dress code policy, not just as part of the dress code, but also on any part of our school campuses, including any of our school-related functions, as I mentioned before. I wholeheartedly condemn any form of racism or prejudice, and I am very happy and glad to support the changes that have been put forth tonight.
Okay. Mrs. Barenborg?
Yes, thank you. indulge me for a minute because I'm going to be a little bit longer than I usually speak. In looking at this, I had to try to remove my own bias. Just like we ask teachers to do in the classroom when they're teaching curriculum, not to bring in their own feelings and their own bias that they have. I grew up in the North. And that being said, when I moved to Texas to teach in my first year of teaching, I was faced with this and I didn't understand it. I was very, very oblivious to what was going on as far as the Confederate flag issues. I also had to learn about hand signals, and becoming a teacher in a really tough area where we had some gangs, I thought those were cute dances and cute symbols and signals. So I learned very quickly that they weren't. And I had to get educated on that. And I think that's the key, is educating people when you understand that something is wrong or you see something is wrong. In other countries, when you go to other countries, you cannot make certain symbols with your hands because you will offend people. Even though that symbol is just fine and dandy in the United States, like the OK symbol, that symbol has now become something different in our own country as well. So you're not understanding when somebody is offended by something until you're educated on that particular purpose. So I educated myself by asking Ms. Diagresta to please send me the information that was given to the board in 2017. And I was curious as to why this wasn't done back then. So she did give me that information, and it's interesting what was given to the board back then. In a nutshell, basically there were several different court cases that were given concerning this topic. In Tinker versus Des Moines Independent Community School District in 1969, U.S. Supreme Court held that officials may prohibit some expressions of student speech if they were able to show facts which might reasonably have led school authorities to forecast substantial disruption of or material interference with school activities. I believe that's what we're referring to here. But such actions by school officials must be motivated by something more than a desire to afford discomfort and unpleasantness that always accompanies an unpopular viewpoint or an unsubstantiated fear of disturbance. So just because somebody comes and says, I'm offended, or we need to take that statue down, or whatever, that may not necessarily be enough as far as the court of law. Going on, it says in Bethel School District versus Frazier, in 1986, they held in favor of the school district in censure of a student's disruptive speech concerning a similar topic. In 2000, in Deno versus School Board of Volusia County here in Florida, they ruled in favor of a school board denying a student to wear a Confederate flag. So that happened in Volusia County just in 2000. In 2003, in Scott versus School Board of Alachua County, the court ruled in favor of the district in suspending students against displaying the flag due to sufficient evidence of racial tension and racially based fights leading up to the event. In White versus Nichols in 2006, the district instituted a ban on displaying the Confederate flag on clothing. The court upheld the ban due to racial tensions at the school prior to the ban. However, in Castonia versus Madison County School Board in 2001, the court was unable to resolve the constitutionality of banning the flag due to clear evidence that the district created a likelihood of violence or other disruption. And the last one in 2014, Denario versus Morgan Hill Unified School District, an administrator asked students to remove their shirts wearing the American flag in a case example of a unique individual example to stop violence as the display was proven to be racial in its intent. In other words, even the American flag had been banned because of the intent of the use. Therefore, I believe this board's job is to make sure that if something is used with the intent to offend or discriminate, then we need to make sure that we are against it. And so for that reason, we cannot erase the past, but we can learn from the past. And I, for one, have learned from this past. We have overwhelmingly gotten people to write us, to call us, to stand up and speak tonight in favor of us putting this not just in our school dress code, but also putting it in our equity policy. I have received a few that are on the opposite side. And for that, I need to speak to something. And that is, it needs to stay, this Confederate flag needs to stay in history books. It needs to be taught as a history lesson. We need to learn from our past, not totally erase it. When people are tearing down statues and they're tearing down statues of people they don't even realize were on the side of what they're fighting for, that's when it's our fault as educators. We're not educating kids to understand their own history. And I think that's where the flag belongs on our campuses. So for that matter, I do support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I need some clarity on this. And I was given the wrong agenda on this, so I apologize if I had given off some wrong information. I have that we are going into a public hearing, and we're not. We're going into approval of language is what we're doing of the code of conduct. My question is, this is the code of conduct, but for it to go into deeper policy, we have to incorporate that throughout the embedding of the policy, correct? And then we do have to have public hearing on that. Tonight, we're agreeing to the language, basically, when we accept this code of conduct. But then what we're going to take with the wording is we're going to come back again and have another public request for a public hearing to approve the actual language for the policy to go in, embed in, I believe it's 5,000 student code policies in the 5,000s. Is that correct? Okay.
May I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mrs. Ork. Just to be clear, the Code of Student Conduct that you're discussing language changes to, that is a policy. I don't want anyone to think that it's not a policy. It's not, I've heard people say it's just the dress code, or something like that. It is a policy, and it has much more in it than just student dress code issues. And the location where the superintendent and Mrs. Dampierre have placed this additional language is in the bullying and harassment section. It's not in the dress code section, but in the bullying harassment section of the policy. So it is a policy that you will be adopting using the rulemaking process, which requires a 28-day notice period and then a public hearing for final adoption. So if the board is comfortable with the language, then starting tomorrow, the notice period will start, and then you'll be able to adopt it finally towards the end of July. And yes, the 5,000 chapter is for students, but there are similar harassment policies with regard to employees in the employee sections, where it would be 1,000, 3,000, and 4,000. So if that's what the board is looking for, then additional language would be dropped into those additional harassment policies in other employment-like sections.
Okay, so tonight we're approving the code of conduct with this new language. And then the next step,
21st, July 21st.
July 21st,
Have a public hearing
on
the code of conduct.
the code of conduct. Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure because none of my information's matching over here. And I do see Mrs. Berenborg, whenever she was mentioning some of the stuff was off, my computer was off, so I didn't see it until I started not aligning with conversation here. So, okay. All right. Any other? Okay, Mrs. Rosario? I am sorry, this has really,
I have an opportunity to, I don't want to say correct, but to clarify something that Mrs. Diagresta just mentioned. So it is, what we were just discussing is language to the bullying and harassment section, but it is also mentioned in the dress code portion. So a lot of people have come in, so I just want to clarify. It is indeed on page 32, written not in the same language, but there is reference to it from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth bullet down in the dress code. And when it refers to the clarification of the symbols, the parentheses says, see page 23. So then it'll go back to 23 where the bullying and the other languages that we were just talking about. So there is a link there between both of those. So it's not just policy, it's not just in that one section, it does address it in the other section.
Okay. I think it's all inclusive. I think like what Mrs. Behrenborg had mentioned, it's just the matter of education and educating. You know, we're not, and I appreciate you going back into the history of the last time. There was a lot of information that was presented at that time that Dr. Moore has done a really good job in presenting additional information that I don't think that the board members had at that time. So I appreciate you going back on that. So at this time, I think we just need to make a motion to approve the language.
Mrs. Zork, I had a comment up there
Yes.
that I think got missed.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For
It's all right.
advertising.
I know it's not on purpose. Two things. One, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what you said because I'm afraid people watching may have gotten lost about
Okay.
exactly what this process is. So I want to say it really clearly and directly. What we are doing right now is approving the language to go into the Code of Conduct. That Code of Conduct has to go out for a public hearing. The public is invited to read the entire Code of Conduct and come back to speak to the board if there is anything they want to support or object to on July 21st. On July 24th, we will either approve the final Code of Conduct or we will not. I anticipate that we will. But I want to make clear to people who are watching that that's how this process goes. We are legally mandated to do it. We don't make up the process. Secondly, I want to refer back to something that Mrs. Rosario said when she talked about teaching history and teaching facts. And we don't have to get into a lengthy conversation about this right now. It's late and everybody is tired. But what gets constituted as facts is often very biased. And when we talk about facts as if they exist in the land of something that is not subject to interpretation and bias, I want to be clear that that's not necessarily how facts go. And that's part of the reason we had such a lengthy conversation tonight about what the Confederate flag means and to whom and its history. As we get further down this road of an equity lens for everything that we do through the district, we will have closer attention to those things in curriculum as well. But I want to be clear that facts as an objective term is not always as objective as it may seem to be. But we will have that conversation ongoingly throughout the course of the year, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. So I need a motion.
I make a motion.
So moved. Second.
Where?
This is the approval to advertise. We're going to advertise it for 28 days, and then we'll come back and bring the public hearing. So to
Right.
advertise for the notice.
Right. Okay, so we have, I'm sorry, Mrs. Rosario? And who made a second?
Schiff.
Dr. Schiff? Okay. All right, we just had a discussion. Do you want to speak to your?
No.
No, okay. Dr. Schiff? Would you like to speak to your?
Ma'am, I think we've talked enough tonight.
Okay. This is just protocol in business meetings. And then any further discussion on this item? No. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. 4-0 for this item. Thank you. I appreciate that. If you don't mind, I do need a 5-minute break because I need to get the right agenda and someone needs to,
Here, just take mine.
It is the,
it's different. So let's, 5 minutes,
For the public
9:20.
Public hearing for
We are going to call this meeting back to order. It is June 23rd, 2020. This is our business meeting, and we are still in action, and we are going to move on to action B, public hearing and adoption of terminal pay policy. Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On May 12, 2020, the board moved approval to set public hearing date to adopt the revised policy. The purposes of the revision is to be consistent with present practice and legislation. The policy change policies was followed in accordance with Florida statute under Florida Administrative Procedures Act, Chapter 120, Rulemaking and School Board Policy Bylaw 0131. The proposed policies are attached.
Okay. This item deals with the adoption of the revised district school board policies. Dr. Moore, have you documented that the public hearing was properly advertised in accordance with the state statutes?
Through the chair, yes, I have.
Okay. We now recess this meeting to conduct the public hearing as advertised. The public hearing is now in recess. Dr. Moore, are there any written responses to the advertised public hearing to be read at this time?
No, not at this time.
The public is invited to address this issue at this time. Is there any individuals representing an organization or his or her own personal or public interest who wishes to speak? The chair concludes that the announced public hearing on the adoptions of the revised district school board policy has been conducted pursuant to notice, and the ample opportunity to address the issue has been provided to all. The board meeting is reconvened at this time, and I need a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion.
Okay? I need a
Second.
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 Okay, Mrs. Rosario, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, ma'am.
Dr. Schiff?
No, ma'am.
Mrs. Berenborg? No?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Moore, did you want to speak to this, or you're good?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. So at this time, we're going to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 4-0. See. Let's see. So now we are going to go into the superintendent's report.
Through the chair, thank you. I will be extremely brief based on the time. I will be presenting information embedded into my Facebook Live regarding opportunities for us as a community to come together, engage, and connect, and bring a level of awareness around the millage that is being brought on in August. So it's just an opportunity to provide opportunities for us as a board, us as a system, to ensure the community understands the opportunity to continue to build upon the momentum that we have set as a system to continue to move this work forward. And tonight, throughout the day, a number of examples of coming together to make difficult, bold decisions to be in the best interest of children, and looking forward to making this schedule public on Friday, in which we could come together and continue to speak through the great work that we are collectively doing as a system. Thank you.
Okay. We do not have any items for discussion, so we will move into school board member matters. I'm going to have, I'm going to start with Dr. Schiff.
Oh, I'm unmuted. No, I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Berenborg.
Sure, I'd just like to say congratulations to all the new principals and the other administrators on your new positions. I wish you the best in this new opportunity. For those of you being affected by the many changes due to the new organizational chart, thank you for hanging in there and for giving it your all. And in order for us to be the top 10, hopefully the top 5 districts in the state, we will need everyone to be a part of this teamwork of change, and it's what our kids deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Rosario?
I have nothing at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I do want to thank Ms. Dampier and her team for putting together the Equity Summit that's coming up tomorrow. I think she's left, no, she's still here. It's going to be a long day tomorrow. The School District of Indian River County is hosting the Equity Committee members to participate in a work session for the 2021 African American Achievement Plan. And that workshop is going to be going from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then from 5 to 8. So it's going to be a long day for them. A lot of important work is going to take place on that. Another area I want to say thank you to, and Mrs. Rosario mentioned it, but I want to say thank you to Dr. Deborah Taylor Long for the event that she's putting together. And that event will be on July 24th, and that is a half-day event, and it's for can you help me with the name?
Equity Conference.
Equity in Action, and she is sending out invitations, but if members of the community would like to come and participate, they need to reach out to Dr. Deborah Taylor Long for this, and in RSVP, because there is limited space on that. One thing that I also want to mention that I'm very excited about, and if we have parents that are still watching or watch the replay on this, the School District of Indian River County has really been working diligently to enhance our career and technical education pathways. We have a new brochure that's coming out, and that's Jason Keeler has put that together. We have so many opportunities for our high school students to go into technical education. I spoke with him today, and he has these brochures that he had given me, and I'll leave some for the board members. But he did mention if you're a parent or a student and you would like to learn more about the opportunities that we are going to have going into the new school year, right now you can reach out to Jason Keeler, and his number is 564-3196, or you can contact him at jason.keeler@indianriverschools.org, and he can walk you through some of the new programs that we will have at both our high schools. And I'm just very excited about this, the changes that we have coming forward. That is all I have tonight. As a board member, a lot of good work going on today, so thank you, board members, for your work and your research and hanging in there for this long day. So, Dr. Moore, Superintendent closing?
Through the chair, just been a very long day, but a very productive day and meaningful day for us as a system. So very proud of the work that we have collectively done, as well as the team here at the district and the work that we're going to be doing collectively as teachers and principals and staff. We're going to be doing great things. Looking forward to hitting those targets well before 2025.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So with that, we're going to adjourn this meeting at 9:31.